This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Naruto Was Not Son of Minato and Kushina. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
The night of the Kyuubi attack, October 10th, Konoha Hospital. A young red-headed kunoichi was in the middle of giving birth when the Kyuubi descended on the secret village of Konoha. Ah, Itai. Son of a bitch. Where the hell is my husband when I need him? The angry woman roared as her body ached from another contraction. The doctor who was in charge of the delivery, Dr. Yamagawa, thought it wise to say, Gomen Uzumaki-san, but Yandaime. Sama is getting ready for the Kyuubi's attack. That beast was the cause of the predicament Kushina was in at the moment. The Kyuubi's aura caused Kushina to go into premature labor more than a month before she was due. They would be nothing for the legendary slug Sannin to heal. Kushina began to bleed internally, and assistant Dr. Tomodachi, who was responsible for attempting to keep Kushina among the living, was unable to stop the bleeding due to the aura and the difficult labor. Where had she gone, then? In the same maternity ward, 7 doors away. Gia, I promise Kami that you purposefully made me intoxicated so you could do this to me. Fortunately, Tsunade was in too much pain to use chakra to increase her strength, so he only had a couple broken knuckles rather than pulp for a hand. She screamed through a contraction as she had the father's hand in a death grip. As her contraction began to lessen, he added with a hint of pride, you know that's not true, Tsunade. But given the chance to change it, I'd do it all over again. Tsunade calmed her breathing and met his gaze before saying, this is it, Jiraiya, with a serious expression on her face. No more snooping. No more females. For your spy network or whatever, you can stop gallivanting across the elemental nations. Just the baby, you, and me, she said definitively. Looking back into her eyes, the white-haired sage smiled and said, yeah, Tsunade, this is it. No more excessive drinking. Definitely no more running, and no more gambling. Me, the baby, and you alone. Promise. She was also able to smile. Promise. When this child stops tearing my insides out, as another contraction tore through her body, she managed to say through clenched teeth. The battle. Hardened kunoichi was faring far better than her fellow soon-to-be mother, even though Tsunade's labor was premature by only a few weeks. This final set of contractions should be at Tsunade. Sama, Shizune, Tsunade's assistant, assured her master as she emerged from her spot at the end of the birthing table. She returned to her previous position after saying, please bear through the pain. Why does Shizune get the really good job of staring at your pussy while I get YEOWCH? Pouted Jiraiya upon seeing this. He yelled as a crack signaled yet another knuckle break. Damn it, I forgot to include your extreme perversion in the deal. Tsunade glared at him. She snarled as the contraction subsided, only to have another one come shortly after, making for a terrible opportunity for a comeback. Yes. You don't hear me bitchy. Yow, but I also forgot about physical abuse. My last good knuckle was that one. The dull crunch of Tsunade breaking his last knuckle in the hand she was holding confirmed Jiraiya's cry. Just be happy that I was only squeezing and not something more important. Tsunade screamed as she began to breathe and push in the Lamans fashion. I can see the head crowning Tsunade. Sama, Shizune said, observing from below as a bulb covered in blood began to push through. These final pushes ought to do the trick. Shizune urged the mother to be. Encouraged by her apprentice, Tsunade screamed through her final pushes, and Jiraiya became cross. Eyed as the vice. Like grip began mash the pieces in his hand together. The baby was born a few weeks early, but it was still as active and talkative as it was when it began to cry. He's beautiful, Tsunade said through her exhaustion as she looked at her weeping son and Jiraiya shook off the pound of his broken hand. Shizune placed the baby in his mother's arms while she cut the umbilical cord and cleaned up the remains. He is unquestionably Haim. Jiraiya concurred with his partner in parenthood, saying, looks like he got your cute nose out of the deal too. Tsunade glanced at her son's nose and said, that does not look like my nose, as the infant scrunched up his nose and made a face. Tsunade perspired and Jiraiya smiled triumphantly. Tsunade chose to speak up after the parents took in the rest of the baby's features. The writhing bundle had bright blue eyes and bright yellow hair, and he nearly looked like a miniature Minato. I am aware that he inherited my mother's hair, but how did he get such vivid blue eyes? Tsunade thought. He might have gotten them from me because I don't have a great memory of my parents, but I'm definitely responsible for his hair consistency. I have no doubt that he will sport his old man's amazing mane once he reaches his teens. Tsunade squinted at the sage as Jiraiya concluded. That hedgehog you call a hairstyle is not something I will ever allow my son to grow. But it's crucial in doing Needle Jizo when he becomes as good as his old man. Jiraiya looked shocked at this. In response, Tsunade said, "Bullshit, sensei, who has short hair, can also use it." As he pouted, Jiraiya crossed his arms and said, "You're just jealous of my awesome hair." Shizune chose to interrupt the argument before Tsunade could respond, saying, "Anyo, if you don't mind, I'd like to take the baby to the nursery to get him cleaned up and do a diagnostic." The parents turned to face the forgotten assistant and then to the baby, who was still covered in Tsunade. Tsunade handed the baby over to her apprentice, her face displaying shyness. Less than 2 miles from the village, the two new parents were left in the quiet room, listening to the now audible sounds of the battle against the king of Biju. With the Kyuubi looming closer to Konoha, "Is it safe to be here?" Tsunade asked Jiraiya. "Even though I'm not even close to the village yet, I can already feel its ranked chakra." In an attempt to calm her fears, Jiraiya placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't worry, hon. I thought of a way to stop it," Minato said. "He has apparently been working on it for the past hour while holed up in his office." "Shouldn't you be helping him?" she asked, looking at him curiously. "I trust the Gaki," Jiraiya said with a smile and a comforting squeeze on her shoulder. "After all, he has outperformed me. He wouldn't think twice about asking for my assistance if he needed it. Furthermore, if I didn't assist in bringing my son into the world, what sort of father would I be?" Jiraiya smiled during the final section. Tsunade couldn't help but think of fathers when she heard this. Given what Kushina endured, I wonder how she is doing. I'm shocked she made it through what happened. Jiraiya looked thoughtfully and said, "I'm not sure. Although she's a strong girl, I'll see how she's doing after we're done." Tsunade. "Sama." Jiraiya was interrupted by Shizune's frantic scream. The room of Kushina Uzumaki. Previously, Kushina's life was fading due to complications from essentially dragging herself out of hell and the Kyuubi's chakra bearing down on her, but if Kushina was anything, she was damn stubborn. She was determined to deliver this baby regardless of the consequences to her life, so she fought through her last few pushes with all the strength she could muster, and eventually brought her stillborn child into the world. Dr. Yamagawa worked feverishly to try to revive the baby, making sure nothing was blocking its air passageway to chakra stimulation of the heart, but it was all in vain. Kushina's expression changed from one of accomplishment to one of concern when she heard no crying. "Doctor? What's wrong, doctor? How come I can't hear my baby?" Fearing the worst, a fading Kushina inquired. "I'm sorry, Kushina-san. He didn't make it," the doctor said, casting a sorrowful glance at the soon-to-be mother and validating her concerns. "No. My baby, no. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Am I? Nah. Was the last thing Kushina said, her eyelids getting heavy as her dying breath left her. Her vitals were dropping, so Dr. Tomodachi tried to stabilize her right away. "Shish. She's leaving us." As her heart monitor flatlined, he shouted to the other doctor, who began resuscitation right away, but Dr. Yamagawa knew it was futile because the Kyuubi was so close. "It's hopeless, there's no way to revive her in this situation," he said, pulling her heart monitor and gesturing to the assistant to stop. Tomodachi glanced at him and realized the same thing. When they called Yamagawa to clean up the body for the coroner, they noted the times of death and Yamagawa left with Kushina's stillborn son. He took the baby's body to a room opposite the NUSERY viewing room and did his best to clean it up, but suddenly Dr. Tomodachi, who was supposed to do the same for Kushina's body, rushed into the room and blurted out, "We need another baby." His expression was one of utter terror. Dr. Yamagawa gave him a bewildered look and said, "What the devil are you talking about?" Still in a panic, Tomodachi went on with his rushed explanation. "I had to break the bad news about Yondaime Sama because she came into Kushina-san's room to check on the delivery. Just before he asked for his son, he appeared ready to kill, so I promised to get him." Yamagawa gave Tomodachi a horrified look and said, "You fool, his son has passed away. How come you didn't tell him?" Right away, Tomodachi shot back, "Then you go tell him." "No way. We then require a second child. Where the hell are we going to get another baby?" Yamagawa asked him doubtfully. After Kushina's issues, the majority of the other pregnant women were transferred to the Hokage monument, so it's not like we're giving birth to a lot of them at the hospital right now. It would also need to have the Yondaime or Kushina's appearance. In light of the scarcity of redheads in this area, where in hell can we locate a newborn boy? When Tomodachi saw Yamagawa in the line of sight, he turned to see what had caught his attention. In the windowed nursery of the maternity ward, across from the room, a raven. Haired woman was carrying a newborn, blonde, baby and placing it in one of the cribs after washing it. She searched the cabinets for something, muttering something irritatedly, and then walking off to another part of the hospital wing to find what she was looking for. Tomodachi turned back to face Yamagawa at the same moment, and the two of them exchanged a brief moment of staring before running for the nursery with the stillborn Namikaze in their arms. Shizune complained to herself, "You would think the best hospital in the shinobi world would be better stocked," until she heard the distant rumbles and roars of the intense battle with the Kyuubi. Shizune was shocked that she had to go on a scavenger hunt just to find the baby something to wear. With no illusion as to why the hospital was essentially empty, she reflected on the giant fox demon being repelled by the valiant men and women of the Konoha shinobi forces and said, "On the other hand, considering current events, I should be grateful the hospital is even here." Only a handful of civilian doctors were caring for the hospital, and even fewer were using medical jutsu, because all the medic nins were near the front lines to tend to the injured. How few the Biju would leave, and most of the civilian doctors were with the civilians in the depths of the Hokage monument. For this reason, Tsunade's group gave birth to the baby alone, not because she would trust anyone else but her own apprentice. Shizune snapped out of her reverie and found what she was looking for in a maternity ward supply closet. She picked up the pajamas and blankets in one arm, closed the door, and walked back to the nursery as her thoughts shifted to her current circumstances. As she opened the doors to the nursery, Shizune thought to herself, no more running around fire country, evading debts collectors. She was glad that Jiraiya had gotten her master pregnant, even though she hated to think about it. Tsunade and Jiraiya would finally settle down with their new son. I might even be able to get a job here and start my own. Quote. Shizune's thoughts abruptly stopped when she saw the baby's pale, motionless body. She knew right away that something was seriously wrong, so she dropped the bundle she was carrying and rushed to the crib. When she saw the baby wasn't breathing, she immediately activated the Mystic Palm Jutsu to start diagnosing and resuscitating him. She quickly tried to resuscitate him, confirming cardiac arrest as well. Panic and frustration grew until she could think of only one thing to do. Tsunade. Sama. After hearing her apprentice scream, Tsunade ran out of bed and hurried to the nursery, Jiraiya following closely behind, completely forgetting that she had just finished 4 hours of labor. The first thing she heard upon arriving was, "Oh Kami no," from Jiraiya behind her, and her expression changed from one of worry to one of horror. Shizune was still desperately trying to revive her baby. The baby stopped breathing and went into cardiac arrest. Shizune's head shot up. "I need assistance," she let out a terrified scream. Tsunade replaced the stuttering apprentice and sprinted over to the infant faster than a Hiraishin. "What happened?" "You were only gone a short while," the Sannin yelled in fear and annoyance. "I'm not sure. He was like this when I returned from my less than 2-minute absence looking for something to wear. There's no logic to it. I've never witnessed a baby's health go from vibrant to this quickly," Shizune answered, watching helplessly with Jiraiya. After coming up with the most horrifying explanation, the worried Toad Sage paled. The Kyuubi's chakra. The two medics were staring at him in despair as he said, "If it can make a woman go into premature labor. If it was the Kyuubi's chakra, there was no way to possibly." Tsunade's face twisted into a fierce expression of determination and rage as she clenched her teeth until they felt like they might break. "No, oh no. I have yet to give up. I won't lose a third loved one. I've already lost 2. And with that the healing chakra she had positioned over the baby surged to twice what it was originally as Tsunade put her all into it. "Jiraiya, get a defibrillator." The machine's wheels barely touched the floor as Jiraiya hurried back to the delivery room, yanked the defib unit from the corner, and handed it to Shizune, who prepared it and pressed the baby's chest with the child-sized paddles. "Make it clear." Tsunade looked for a heartbeat, but there was none as the baby's body jumped from the shock. Once more. Shizune charged it once more and reset the paddles as she continued to channel the green chakra into the infant, oxygenating the blood and allowing it to circulate throughout the body. "Make it clear." The baby jumped again but still nothing was gained. Shizune charged the machine a third time, needing no prompting from her master. "Clear." The body jerked once more, but nothing happened. As the jutsu sputtered and died from lack of control and lack of chakra, Tsunade stared past the silent form of what was to be her son, reliving the terrible memories of how she couldn't save Dan either. By this point, she was exhausted from overpowering the Mystic Palm Jutsu, her hands shaking, and tears streaming down her face along with sweat. Silently, Jiraiya approached her and placed her hands on her shoulders, causing them to tremble, before slowly turning to gaze at Jiraiya's face, which was marred by tears. "Let me apologize, Tsunade." Shizune silently sobbed to herself as she gazed down at the dead body she was meant to care for. There's nothing left you can do, she thought to herself, knowing that he was correct. The present caught up with her, causing her knees to buckle as she fell to the ground, with Jiraiya coming right down to comfort her. As she heard her master's heartbreaking sobs, she thought, it wasn't supposed to be like this. This wasn't supposed to happen. A little earlier, with the Yondaime, while waiting for the doctor to bring his son, Minato sat by the side of his late lover's bed. The young Hokage was crying as he spoke to his departed lover. My dear Kushina, I apologize for not being there for you. Perhaps the outcome would have been different. Minato had to gather himself before he could say, I hope you can forgive me for that, but mostly for what I'm about to put on our child's shoulders. What right do I have to ask another parent to sacrifice their child for something I wouldn't risk our own? All I can do is hope the village accepts him as the person he will become for fending off the Kyuubi. With those final words, the Yondaime kissed his lover, tears streaming down his cheeks and onto Kushina's. Rest eternal, my love. I hope the Shinigami shows mercy and let me see you someday on the other side. The door opened and the doctor he had ordered earlier brought in his son, and Tomodachi straightened himself as he heard footsteps approaching the room. Here you are, Yondaime. Sama, he stammered, still feeling intimidated by the earlier meeting, and he hoped he didn't notice anything odd about the baby. Fortunately, the baby looked strikingly similar to the Yondaime, so Tomodachi was fairly certain he could get away with it. Hey Naruto, Tomodachi said, observing the Yondaime's sorrowful smile at the infant in his arms. The newborn slowly opened its eyes to gaze at the man holding him as he went on, saying, I'm sorry, little guy, but I need your help to save the village. I'm me, your dad. As new tears streamed from his eyes, the Yondaime said, I hope you can forgive us for not being around to watch you grow up, but I'll make sure everybody knows you're a true hero for what we're about to do. After taking one last look at Kushina's body, he left the room to give the Sandaime his final instructions. After the Yondaime left, Tomodachi released the breath he had been holding and collapsed on the ground. Yamagawa entered the room and spoke after first checking to make sure the Hokage was gone. Was he aware? Not in the least bit, Tomodachi said, turning to face him with a relieved expression. Good, now that our lives aren't in immediate danger anymore, we can get back to work, Yamagawa sighed with relief. Whose baby do you think that was? Tomodachi nodded, then became thoughtful. Before dismissing his colleague, Yamagawa raised an eyebrow and said, Who cares? The two doctors left to find the coroner for Kushina's body after saying, There's no point in worrying, the body looked almost exactly like that baby. If they had stayed and paid closer attention, they would have seen Kushina's tiny, shallow breaths. With the Yondaime in control, the Sandaime was content with his retirement and hoped that he could live out the rest of his days knowing that he had fulfilled his responsibility to Konoha and that he could rest easy knowing that the village was in good hands. It was supposed to be a golden age for Konoha, not seen since before the Second Great Shinobi War, with the pregnancy of Minato's lover and the startling revelation that his two students had, accidentally, created a long-lost Senju heir. However, this was not to be, and Hiruzen knew he would retake the seat after the Yondaime informed him of his plan. Minato, are you certain about this? Is there no alternative? Now that Kushina is gone, he would have no one to support him during this difficult time under your proposal. I know Sandaime. Don't know, but Naruto is the best choice, the Yondaime said, casting a sorrowful glance down at the sleeping baby. My son might be the strongest child to wear the seal, and I couldn't ask a parent for another child. All I ask is that you take care of him and comply with my previous request. All right, Minato, I'll do everything in my power for your son, the Sandaime said with a solemn nod. However, he advised, to keep you and your enemies away from him, I suggest he go under his mother's family name. The Yondaime nodded, saying, That's a wise choice, but will you tell him when he's older? Additionally, apologize to Ero Sensei for being unable to join him and Tsunade. That I will, the Sandaime said with a sorrowful smile. I wish Yondaime no luck. The Yondaime vanished in a yellow flash, and Gamabunta, the Toad boss, was seen being called outside the village as the Yondaime proceeded to face the Kyuubi on the battlefield. I hope your sacrifice will bring peace to Konoha once again. At the hospital again, when Tsunade's tears finally stopped, the defeated woman's empty shell lay on the floor in the arms of her equally distraught father, staring blankly at the tiled floor while she struggled to put words together. Jiraiya. It's just that I can't, I need to. He couldn't really blame her because Jiraiya understood what she was trying to say. I know, hon. He sadly agreed with her, saying, The promise. I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Even without the genjutsu, she gazed into his eyes, which appeared to be 30 years older than her own. What will you do? Probably leave too. Jiraiya sighed, feeling older than he should be. The Toad Sage said, the network is still there and with nothing holding me here. He stopped short as a wave of sadness swept over his face once more, then continued, I'll go talk to Sensei before I leave to see how things turn out. After giving Tsunade a forehead kiss and saying, take care of yourself, Haim, your luck. Our luck won't always be this horrible. Jiraiya then left Tsunade to take care of herself. Tsunade got up, gathered her dead child, and planned to bury him far from Konoha, in Tanzaku-gai. Aren't you coming, Shizune? She asked, noticing her apprentice's lack of movement as she began to leave. With fear and uncertainty in her eyes, the woman with raven hair said, but I should have. I failed, how could you? Shizune! Yelled the older woman. When Shizune's eyes locked with her master's, she jerked back. You weren't at fault. The furball owned it. We could have, should have, and would have stayed out of the village, but we chose not to. As irate tears streamed down her cheeks, she screamed, mostly at herself. Looking at her master in shock, Shizune said, Tease. Tsunade. Sama. Let's go, Tsunade sighed, turning back to her apprentice. Both women left the hospital to vanish in the confusion after Shizune nodded solemnly and said, Hi Tsunade. Sama. I need to get out of this cursed village as soon as possible. In combat, one of the Anbu Med Nins just off the front lines was desperately trying to stabilize as many wounded as she could, and Konoha's shinobi were not looking good. The Fox didn't leave many survivors, which was fortunate for her but unfortunate for others, so the number of wounded was manageable. However, the severity of the wounds negated any advantage she had in numbers, and any progress she made in stabilizing the patient was hampered by demonic chakra as thick as fog. Rin was the only medic in their sector to treat the wounded, with all the other medics either stationed elsewhere on the battlefield or suffering from chakra exhaustion, so she took another food pill as her reserves began to run low, the perspiration streaming down her purple tattooed cheeks behind her Anbu mask. When she finally stabilized her current patient, she saw two others die from their wounds while she was treating the third. She immediately got up and looked for the next patient to work on, the triage marks on their head indicating which one was more likely to survive with or without medical intervention. The sounds of the battle with the Fox blended with the cries and groans of the wounded. Her old teammate Kakashi vanished to somewhere on the front line, leaving her with only two fresh Jenin to help her drag the wounded and dying back. Tanuki-san, one of the Genins responsible for retraction of the injured, told her. When she looked up, she saw that her two Genin charges, Nanami and Hiroshi, were carrying a Chunin kunoichi, too large for the kids to even carry, back from the battlefield by her arms. She waved briefly to show where she was on the hellish, dark battlefield before going pale and yelling, "Look out!" Looking over their shoulder, the two Genins went wide-eyed, leapt forward to avoid the demon tail that crashed no more than 2 feet away from them, and then swung back around to smash another poor bastard who was not fast enough. The two Genins immediately got back up and pulled the kunoichi by the arms once more to the Anbu medic, who was relieved. Rin let out a sigh of relief that they were safe, but as they approached, she began to pale once more. "Set her down and come to me," she said, she shouted. "But she's wounded, Tanuki-san," the two Genins said, staring at her as if she were crazy. Exclaimed Nanami, beginning to turn to face the kunoichi. "No, avoid looking." It was too late when Rin attempted to inform the Genins. They both went wide-eyed and froze completely when they realized they were only carrying half of what they had started with everything below the ribcage mashed down in the earth 200 feet back. Nanami began to hyperventilate as they dropped the upper torso, and the Chunin's head moved to stare lifelessly towards them. Fearing that they would go into shock, Rin began to run towards them. However, she wasn't the only one who saw the two Genin in horror. The demon fox fixed its gaze on them. Rin accelerated her pace in an attempt to avoid them as the Kyuubi began to charge at them. As the Kyuubi's fangs devoured what remained of the other kunoichi and 30 cubit feet of the soil beneath it, Rin and the two Genin were flung 50 feet from the looming doom, only to have it refocus its sights on the three. She rushed up to them, wrapped her arms around their midsections, and leapt as hard as she could to the right. Rin started to dodge again, the Genin still in her arms, but before the beast could do so, a flurry of sharp wooden tentacles sprang from the treetops, spearing the Kyuubi in the right side of its face. Rin turned to see that Dragon was attempting to distract itself from her and the two Genin, who were now in complete shock and in need of medical care as well. Luckily, it was successful, as the Kyuubi gave the Anbu, who had just attempted to gouge its face, a hateful glare and attacked him as he fled back into the woods, luring the Kyuubi to another front of the battlefield. Rin sighed with relief once more, but was taken aback when Dragon materialized directly beside her. "Didn't you lure it away?" she inquired as to whether she needed to resume running. The wood clone pointed to the location where he had been earlier. "It should keep it busy for a while," Dragon said, then turned to search for something. "Where the hell is Inu?" he asked, turning back to her. "I believed he was watching out for you and your group." After putting the two Jenin down to begin treating them, Rin sagged her shoulders and said, "I'm not sure. He simply charged in after the Chunin we were with were crushed beneath a tree. After separating these two from their Jenin squad, I assigned them the task of transporting injured soldiers away from the front lines." Before a lightning strike struck the Biju's side, they heard Inu's voice calling out a jutsu. The Biju immediately turned its sights back from its original direction and roared monstrously. As soon as Tanuki and Dragon noticed this, they exclaimed, "What the hell is he doing? Back here, he's leading the way." "Before it's too late, Tanuki, get your team out of here," Dragon shouted, beginning his diversionary strategy once more. Rin picked up the unconscious Jenin and began running in their direction, just as the Kyuubi did the same. Fortunately, something large began hopping in their direction before Rin had to resume dogging, finally refocusing its attention. When Rin looked up, she saw something she was extremely happy to see. "Gamabunta. It's Minato Sensei." As Tanuki and Dragon watched the two mountain-sized animals begin to fight, she left. The fight was only 100 yards away, so it wasn't a good place to rest. That may seem like a good distance, but in a battle like this, it's like being 2 feet away from a jutsu fight. As the Yondaime and his summon battled the king of the Biju, Tanuki and Dragon both retreated further. Gamabunta suddenly seized hold of the fox demon, but not before suffering a gash across his eye in retaliation. Rin looked up to see her sensei set down a bundle and begin examining hand seals on top of the enormous toad's head. "Gaki, hurry up! I can't hold him motionless for long." A bright light glowed from the top of the toad's head and spread throughout the demolished forest shortly after she heard the toad boss say to Minato up top. With Inu, after a moment of fighting off the demon, his sensei appeared on the battlefield and began to battle it with his enormous summons, forcing Kakashi to retreat. After another minute, a bright light appeared and, as it faded, the demon vanished. Kakashi watched as the giant summons laid his prone sensei's figure on the ground before exploding into smoke, and his amnesia came to an end as he hurried to investigate. With Tanuki, Rin stared for a few seconds before cheering as the bright light faded and her eyes refocused. Did the Kyuubi also vanish? He succeeded. The Biju was discarded by him. She saw the giant summon set down the prone form of her teacher and Hokage before vanishing back to his realm, and her next words, "He," died in her throat. Rin yelled rapidly, "Dragon, with the Jenin, stay here. I will determine whether or not he requires medical assistance," she concluded as she walked away in the direction of the toad boss. She hoped it was simply chakra fatigue, but given the way the day was going, she knew to expect the worst by now. She did wonder, though, what the little bundle in Sensei's arms before the light was. With the Yondaime rapidly fading, satisfied that the village was safe, Minato lay there as his body shut down. He turned to the baby's weeping form, with the seal on its stomach clearly visible, and strained to say, "Thanks little guy, you're a hero now." The baby stopped crying to look at the man beside it. I gotta say little guy, you're gonna grow up to look a lot like your old man. But I can't for the life of me figure out where you got that nose. It's almost looks exactly like," the dying Hokage said, grinning at the staring baby before noticing a humorous resemblance. The baby scrunched its nose at Minato, causing his eyes to widen. As things grew gloomier, the Hokage thought, "Tsunade's, they didn't." Recalling what had happened at the hospital, he finally concluded, "Oh. FF fuck," and with that, he closed his eyes and died. With Inu, the sight of his sensei dead on the ground made Kakashi's eyes widen, and he ran up to his body to confirm the worst. Whatever he had done must have cost him his life. Then he saw the wiggling bundle beside the man, and the seal on its stomach, which caught his attention, and his grief turned to anger as he pulled a kunai and prepared to kill the baby. With Tanuki, she jumped the final few feet, her arm outstretched in the hopes of arriving in time as he began the downstroke, and was shocked to see Inu ready to plunge a kunai through what she could now see as a baby. Sensei's son, she thought as she immediately ran towards them at speeds she didn't think she was capable of. Overall perspective. Instead of seeing a dead demon, Kakashi saw a kunai through an outstretched hand, and as he turned to face the owner, his former teammate immediately decked him in the side of the head. "What in the world are you doing?" Rin yelled at Kakashi, eh? After the punch, he snapped back to reality and retorted, "Killing a demon. Sensei was killed by a demon. Why in the world are you defending it, then?" Rin appeared surprised, saying, "What the hell, Kakashi? This is the son of Sensei. Damn the demon." As she picked up the baby to protect him from any further assaults, she shot back. When it was inserted into him, Kakashi leapt to his feet and declared, "It ceased to be Sensei's son. Nothing could possibly contain that thing." Tenzo arrived at the clearing with the two Jenin under his arm and discovered this scene as well. "Tanuki, see what he wants done after you take him to the Sandaime. I need assistance returning the injured to the hospital, Inu." "Dragon, since when the hell are you the squad leader?" Kakashi said, squinting his eyes at Tenzo. He spat in the Anbu's direction. "When you chose to leave Tanuki's group to battle a demon rather than an Inu, Tenzu's entire attitude changed. Assist me now, and I might forget to file that small stunt you did." Before leaping towards Rin's patients, Kakashi flinched and gave the baby a final, poisonous glare behind his mask. Rin tucked the baby under one arm and raised the Yondaime's body over her shoulder. She shrugged her shoulder as Dragon gave her a curious glance, based on what she could see around his mask anyhow. "Maybe I should move them both." After explaining that there was no reason to keep his body out here, Tenzo nodded and Rin began her journey toward the Hokage Tower, although she was moving more slowly than she should have because of the additional weight. Returning with Jiraiya, the Toad Sage listened to the sounds of the terrible battle occurring less than a mile away as he slowly leapt across the buildings toward the Hokage Tower. Suddenly, a bright light spread across the town from where the Kyuubi was, and then everything fell silent. He saw a big red lump explode into smoke as he turned to face the location of the battle. The Sannin thought, "That couldn't have been Gamabunta?" and accelerated his pace in the direction of the Hokage Tower, landing on the roof with a final leap only to find his old sensei there as well, gazing out over the battlefield. With just 2 words, the Sandaime explained everything to Jiraiya, who was looking at him in confusion. "Shikifa, Jin," was the old Hokage's statement as he smoked his pipe, and Jiraiya's eyes widened. He didn't. Was that his plan? Knowing that such a seal meant that his student was dead, he screamed out in frustration, "Eh?" Then he had another thought. What about his son? What about Kushina? Hesitantly, he asked. As he turned to face him, the Sandaime said, "He told me Kushina died during childbirth, and his son. He used to seal the demon away. With his son dead, Tsunade gone again, another of his best students dead along with his lover, and his student's child now a Jinchuriki." Jiraiya collapsed to the ground, looking like a defeated man. "What about yours and Tsunade?" the Sandaime asked his student anxiously. He failed to show up. Knowing what he was going to ask, Jiraiya replied, the beast's chakra was too much for him. With this fresh round of bad news, the Sandaime winced, saying, "Jiraiya, I'm sorry to hear that. In the midst of this terrible tragedy, I sincerely hoped that something would go well today. How will you and Tsunade proceed?" inquired the seasoned leader. After gathering himself, Jiraiya got back up and said, "Tsunade and Shizune had already left the village." He said, "I don't think she will ever be coming back." "I wouldn't expect her to," Hiruzen said, nodding solemnly in response to his student's response. He said, "Not after everything that's happened." Jiraiya nodded in agreement and then turned to face the forest. "As for me, I suppose I'll be doing the same because the spy network still needs me." As he turned to go, he concluded, "I'll keep you updated." Jiraiya said. Hiruzen glanced at his student's retreating forms. "How about your godson?" The Toad Sage came to a halt. "Gomen sensei, but at this moment, I simply cannot. When he grows up, I might return to train him. I will also prevent Minato's adversaries from learning about him. Will you, sensei, look after him for me?" With a solemn nod, the Sandaime said, "I'll do what I can for the boy." Jiraiya then disappeared from the roof, disappearing from Konoha for more than 10 years. At the hospital again, as the coroner and his assistant nurse rolled the gurney into Kushina's room to prepare to place her body in the morgue, the nurse realized right away that something was amiss and prepared to move her to the gurney. "Doctor, how come she's still warm?" she inquired. "They called us 15 minutes ago." "For Cammy's sake, she's still alive." The coroner removed his rubber glove and held it up to her mouth, feeling a faint but warm breath. "On the spot, get a medic in here. Hopefully not those two morons." Like individuals who are incapable of distinguishing between a patient and a corpse. As the assistant nurse hurried to the emergency room, he gave her the order to do just that. As he sat in what was once again his chair, The Sandame was not happy. Earlier, his chosen successor, Minato Namikaze, had sealed away the Kyuubi into his own son using a kinjutsu, which one of Minato's students had brought back to him from the battlefield. Tanuki and the child accompanied him to the council chambers to discuss the current situation, only to discover that a portion of the council was attempting to use emergency powers to pass laws that would have usurped much of the Hokage's military authority. Thankfully, he was able to stop the process in its tracks and beat the council back into submission by demonstrating his emergency powers. Unfortunately, the counselor who had said emergency powers would need to have his ribcage rebuilt through several surgeries. He then had to declare that the Kyuubi had been sealed into Minato's son. The civilian council wanted to finish the job, but they were much quieter than before. Danzo, as expected, wanted to use him as a weapon, and Sarutobi's advisors and teammates wanted him under lock and key. Hiruzen, of course, refused to back down. Just do for Shubaku. Enough. I came only to update you on his condition and the Yondaime's most recent request. However, I have limited options because many of you present do not want to comply with that request. His sealing and Kyuubi status make him a S-Class 1, and those who already know won't tell him under threat of death, especially to his generation. Having said that, Sarutobi declared definitively, he will be looked after by someone of my choosing until he is able to be transferred to the orphanage for adoption. The civilian side was furious, but the majority of the shinobi side agreed with this wholeheartedly, and they could have had more control over the fate of the Kyuubi brat if they had passed their laws, but they were unable to touch him until he was no longer under the Sandame's care. Shikaku, the leader of the Nara clan, made the decision to voice his opinion after considering the following. Hokage. Sama, what are you going to do about his lineage? He handled the matter in his customary slack way, saying, if Iwa smells a Namikaze heir in Konoha without parents, things could get very troublesome. Sarutobi had already considered that. It implies that he will have to adopt his mother's name in order to shield himself from his father's adversaries until he can defend himself using his real name. As a result, he will be well known, and Uzumaki Naruto and his background will be kept a secret by the SS. If you break this law, your entire family will be killed, he said somberly, looking at the council members' pale faces. With a sigh, he concluded the meeting by saying, with that all said, until a time when all casualties and damages have been accounted for, this meeting is adjourned. Tanuki and the child trailed him as he left the council chambers. Jutsu Induru no Furushubaku as he watched Tanuki rock the baby back to sleep. The Hokage thought, yes, that meeting could have been better. This made him think of his most recent traumatic experience, which was the death of Jiraiya and Tsunade's son. He knew that it was 10 times more difficult for them than it was for him. Despite Tsunade's constant criticism of Jiraiya for using her womb to spawn another super pervert into the world, you could see the fire and life gradually resurfacing in her eyes every day. As much as it hurt to think about it, Hiruzen didn't think Tsunade would ever return. She was going to have a child that she had long since given up on, and losing her child, basically, to the village must have broken her, and why wouldn't it? Since Jiraiya was always better at controlling his emotions than others, the old Hokage couldn't even imagine whether or when Jiraiya would return to the village. He could only hope he did so for his godson's sake at least. Even Jiraiya was ecstatic about having a son. He had even purchased a house and renovated one of the rooms for the baby. Now that both his student and his child were dead, could things get any worse? Hokage. Sama, all casualties and wounded have been accounted for and taken to the proper facilities, Dragon said, deciding to stop by and update the Sandame on his situation. All right, give it to me, said Sarutobi, bracing himself while chewing on the end of his pipe. Dragon then grimly informed him, 276 dead, 96 wounded. Sarutobi sighed wearily and sagged into his chair. How many of the injured will be able to return to active duty? Almost half of our current shinobi forces were already lacking prior to the war, he inquired. Only 42 Hokage. Sama could respond positively, Dragon said. For the remainder of their lives, they will be disabled. What about the 2 Jenin that were with me, Nanami and Hiroshi? Tanuki inquired, recalling her 2 charges. Dragon gave a smile, they made it. I think they'll need a psych evaluation though, like a lot of others. Tanuki, why were 2 Jenin with an Anbu squad? The Hokage asked, intrigued by her inquiry. The Chunin medic I was with was killed and Dragon was running diversions to keep the fox away from the wounded. I found them separated from the rest of their Jenin squad so I conscripted them into pulling wounded to me, Tanuki said, turning away from Dragon to face the Hokage. She replied. How disorganized the battlefield must have been for them, the Hokage wondered. After acknowledging the response with a nod, he returned his focus to Dragon. Is that all to report? No, Hokage. Sama. The coroner wanted me to inform you that Kushina Uzumaki is still alive, Dragon said, shaking his head. What? Minato told me she was dead. How is this possible? The Hokage barked in exasperation, causing Naruto to wake up and begin fussing. Sarutobi's eyebrows threatened to shoot off the top of his head. Dragon appeared to be startled. He said that Kushina-san's life signs were so faint that the doctors in charge of her must not have been able to detect them. The coroner called one of the lead medics once they left the shelter. He said her heartbeat and breathing have steadily increased after receiving medical care. Unfortunately, she slipped into a coma from prior negligence. He doesn't know when or if Kushina-san will wake, he concluded. Naruto laughed as Sarutobi defeated him by slamming his head against the top of the desk. Well, at least someone's cheerful around here. Even though he might never know his mother, the Hokage said with a humorless laugh. I have yet to designate a caregiver for him during his first year of life. Who is the question? As he watched Tanuki tickle the giggling infant and make baby noises at him, he continued to think. A grin spread across his face as he glanced up at Tanuki, then down at Naruto, and finally back up at Tanuki. That his colleague set herself up that way made Dragon perspire. Until she said, You're just a bright ball of sunshine, aren't you? Don't you agree, Hokage? Wait. I can't. Tanuki remained blissfully ignorant. The Hokage said, Tanuki-chan, I have a long-term B-ranked mission just for you. While giving her a false smile. In an attempt to contest the ruling, Tanuki said, but Hokage. Sama, I've never. Then it will be good experience for you. Think of it as learning firsthand about parenthood, without the stretch marks. He disconnected her once more. Hokage. Sama, was his statement, and Tanuki looked shocked. The fact is, Tanuki, that he needs someone to care for him until he gets on his feet, literally. You, being one of the Yondaime's students, are the perfect choice. Not only that, it seems little Naruto has already grown a bond with you, he said, waving off her argument before it even began. He was pointing to the baby who was attempting to remove her mask. Dragon, who was snickering in his own corner, decided in Tanuki-san, it's an easy, good-paying mission, and sure to beat some of the ones we'll be given in the future. With half of the shinobi forces gone, we'll have to send undermanned squads on missions that would clearly call for twice as big of squad. This keeps you in the village for a year or more, and by then the situation might settle down more. I guess you're with me for a while, little guy, Tanuki said, lowering her shoulders in surrender as she gazed at the baby who was still attempting to remove her mask. Now that Naruto's predicament was resolved, the Hokage grinned and said, Then you might as well take your mask off, Rin, before he does it for you. Rin removed her mask at the Sandame's insistence, much to Naruto's surprise, who appeared to have grown a second face until she stuck her tongue out at him, at which point he simply resumed clapping and laughing. To say she looked like a complete mess after the long day would be an understatement, but it felt good to remove that stuffy mask. She had sweat and dust on her face, and her eyes were baggy and exhausted as she turned to face the Hokage. As she watched Naruto begin to nod off once more, she said, what should I do about things for the baby Hokage? Sama. I'm sure there aren't any stores open right now, and my apartment isn't what you would call baby-friendly. The Hokage had already considered this, and although he felt bad about taking advantage of his students' losses, he was unable to come up with a better location. My 2 students set up a house for their child. Unfortunately, they lost him in the Kyuubi attack. I don't believe they will be coming back anytime soon, so you may use it for the duration of your mission. As he took the extra set of keys Jiraiya had given him and scrawled down the address, the Hokage said. So, we lost the Senju heir, Hokage. Sama. Dragon asked quietly after realizing what the Hokage had said. In order to possibly teach that child what he knew, he hoped that the Mokuton bloodline would be reawakened in him. He believed he had a duty to reimburse the Senju for his gift, but he was never able to do so. The Hokage sighed. And most likely Tsunade will never come back, not that I would blame her after how many loved ones she's lost. But it would be a waste to let the room in the house go unused. Minato never really had a chance to get ready for Naruto and planned to move into the Hokage mansion. Obviously that can't happen now, so there's nowhere else to put him. I'll do my best to care for him and keep him safe, Hokage. Sama, Rin said with a solemn nod as she accepted the keys and address. She left the room with a sleeping Naruto in her arms after the Hokage gave her a nod. Dragon turned back to the elderly leader after Rin had left the room. What about Kushina-san, Hokage? Sama? He asked. Sarutobi smoked his pipe and considered his options for dealing with Kushina until he came to the best conclusion. He fixed his gaze on Dragon. Have her transferred to the medical facilities inside the Hokage monument. Until she wakes up, she is to be declared dead. Not only will it keep any enemy away from her that might want to use Kushina to control or kill Naruto, but it will be best that Naruto doesn't know about her until she's awake, to keep him from grieving over her until she does. Seated personally Dragon, and keep as many people out of the loop as possible, he gave him the order. After giving his orders, Dragon bowed to the Hokage and left the room with Shunshin. Sarutobi made the decision to retire after the last Anbu died. He was aware that meetings and the dreaded paperwork would turn into a flurry of activity later today. It's best to sleep as much as you can before. As he locked up his office, Hiruzen thought bitterly, I get out, and they pull me back in. If I'm around to see the next Hokage, I'm stapling his ass to the chair. Even though he adores the village, he did not sign up for this. Till death do we part, nonsense. With Naruto still soundly asleep in her arms, Rin strolled down the dim streets toward the address the Sandame had given her. After the threat had passed, many people were still out cleaning up the mess. Like Kakashi and the civilian council, Rin couldn't help but notice that some people were staring at the infant in her arms. Are they aware? But how? Rin asked herself, feeling uneasy under their scowls. Did Kakashi inform them, or did shinobi other than her Anbu squad witness the sealing? She took to the rooftops because she was afraid someone might attempt to do more than glare at him. They wouldn't be able to find out where he lived either. Before Sandame's law took effect, whoever told them had to have done so. Before too many people learned about Naruto, hopefully, the law would be known. As Rin arrived at the address, she thought with a sense of humor, leave it to civilian gossip to blacklist someone who's only a day old. She leapt to her feet in front of the house and took a close-up look. It was a two-story white-siding cottage with a fenced-in yard on the town's edge, the perfect location for a family. Rin reflected sorrowfully, a family that would never be around to use it. She knew two individuals personally in addition to a family. As she considered the two prospective parents, she began to move toward the door along the stone path. As Minato Sensei's mentor, Jiraiya had met him numerous times. In the most recent instance, he boasted to Minato about how much of a ladykiller his son would be due to his father's devilishly attractive appearance, and Minato Sensei reminded him that he needed to get Tsunade wasted, knocked up, and kicked from one fire country border to the other the following morning in order to sweep a girl off her feet. Jiraiya responded that he enjoyed the difficult ones. Indeed, it's difficult to obtain. Then Tsunade appeared. Rin would occasionally visit her when she went to the hospital for a pregnancy checkup. Even though she was constantly complaining about Jiraiya and all of his flaws, it was clear that she was only acting tough because she knew how much he loved her. This was only demonstrated when Tsunade began to feel exhausted every day. Tsunade's bridal style was carried into the hospital by Jiraiya. Despite being red with shame and griping about being able to walk, Tsunade did nothing to improve the situation. Following a battery of tests, it was discovered that the infant was also removing chakra from Tsunade's body in addition to nutrients. His chakra network had already begun to form, something that typically didn't happen until he was 4 or 5 years old. As they pondered what that meant, both parents stared at Rin. He was going to be extremely strong and probably focus on ninjutsu. To describe Jiraiya's smile as insane would be an understatement. It would be a huge understatement to say he was considering his son's options a bit too much. Tsunade made fun of him when he began discussing training him early, gave him a gentle warning when he considered searching the Hokage archives for additional jutsu to teach him, and simply slapped him across the head when he proposed attaching a speaker to her womb and piping audio jutsu instructions. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, shouted Tsunade. I'm not going to have my stomach blow up from a fire jutsu just because you wanted to start him off early. Rin's perspiration dropped. Though she knew better than to argue, she thought, she totally missed the fact that he wouldn't understand what was being piped into the womb anyway. Unfortunately, they were both gone now, and they never found out how their son would have grown up. The absence of Minato Sensei after what Kakashi attempted to do last night, Kushina-chan was in a coma and didn't even want to see him. She became aware that she was currently alone at that moment. She unlocked the front door, still reeling from that. As she opened the door, she muttered to herself, Ohama Shimasu. She discovered something somewhat depressing within. Appliances, paint, carpets, and furniture have all been replaced. The house appeared to be barely inhabited. That must be the case, she thought. She was aware that Jiraiya had only completed the renovations a few weeks prior and had only purchased the house approximately a month and a half ago. She entered the kitchen and looked in the cabinets and refrigerator. It wasn't until she opened the final cupboard that she discovered a few cups of instant noodles and some leftover takeout bottles and baby formula. At least she wouldn't have to go shopping for the baby just for herself anytime soon. It seems that Naruto must have woken up while they were exploring the first floor. Sadly, Rin's first clue came when a baby's mouth clamped down on her breast. "Gia," she cried, yanking him away, which made him start to cry. "Of course he's hungry, ding dong," she said to herself as she perspired. Since his birth, he has not eaten. She picked up a bottle and some of the formula and got to work. After a small mess, Naruto was contentedly sucking on a bottle. Rin became conscious of how worn out and unclean she felt due to the lack of activity. After Naruto finished, he began to fuss once more. She lifted Naruto onto her shoulder and said to herself, "Crap, what am I supposed to do now? Think, oh, I have to burp him." Before she heard a small belch and something slipping down the back of her shirt, she began patting his back. She deadpanned, "Definitely bedtime." She fumbled to wipe the vomit off her back, then picked up Naruto and went upstairs. She searched several rooms before locating the baby's room. The room was a perfect reflection of the owner's. The blue walls were surrounded by imprints of contented frogs and slugs. Baby toys were piled in a toy chest, and baby books were stacked on a shelf. When she approached the crib, she discovered that a big stuffed frog and a stuffed slug were inside. Rin could not imagine where Tsunade had discovered a comforting slug. Naruto was too preoccupied with the stuffed animals to sleep, so she put him in the crib. She went to look for the restroom, assuming he would eventually fall asleep. Right now, a bed and a shower sounded wonderful. Jackpot, was the first thought that came to mind when she opened the door to what she thought was the bathroom. The sight of the master bathroom was painful. A jacuzzi tub ran along the left wall, and a tiled shower stall and vanity were set into the right wall. A significant improvement over the half bathroom in her apartment, though probably not fit for a lord. She was unable to remove her clothing quickly enough. She prepared the shower and the tub and jumped in to wash herself. After finishing the shower, she hurried into the tub and practically melted as the hot water jets released the tense muscles in her body. Blood, perspiration, and dirt poured down the drain as she washed herself. Thoughts of the past returned to her as she relaxed in the tub. She felt isolated because practically everyone she knew was gone. Having spent the last 2 years of her 16-year-old life in Anbu, she had never been able to make many friends. Her lack of social interaction following Obito's passing didn't help either. Now that she wasn't so preoccupied with missions, perhaps she could take care of that. In fact, she might benefit from this. Despite her body's protests, she got out of the tub and dried herself off with that in mind. Not bothering to wear a towel, she went to find the bedroom now that she didn't smell like death on a warm day. She discovered a certain Jiraiya in the bedroom. Red satin sheets on a heart-shaped bed. She perspired. Did he really believe that this was where Tsunade would have slept? She drew back the sheets and shrugged it off. When she got in, she discovered that it was actually much more comfortable than her actual bed. As she began to fall asleep and heard Naruto wailing, she thought, "This mission is going to be nice and easy." "Did I jinx it?" she asked, opening her eyes wide. As she dragged herself back out of bed to see how he was doing, she thought. When she walked into his room and smelled something foul, she decided. As she picked him up to change him, she said, "Yeah, I jinxed it," putting him in a position where he could reach for one of her bare breasts. Oh. October 25th, after 3 weeks of Rin's assignment. Rin's designated home at 10:34 a.m., with her eyes half-lidded and ringed with dark circles from fatigue. Rin gazed at the baby in her arms. He was a demon. No, not that one, because this brat is far superior to the Kyuubi. You would simply be killed by the Kyuubi. Naruto was less forgiving. By keeping you up at night and making you anxious, this child slowly killed you. He required changing when he wasn't hungry, which was hardly ever, and he would cry or fuss over other things when he wasn't. Clothes, dishes, blankets, and food packages were all over the house. Training Ground 44 would have looked like a garden patch due to the weeds that were growing on the shit-looking lawn. Kushina wouldn't have made it through this kid, Rin reflected gloomily. When she awoke, Naruto clamped down on her cloth-covered nipple once more. It had become so commonplace by this point that Rin tolerated it for the sole reason that it temporarily silenced him. That is, until he discovered once more that he would not benefit from it. He began to cry as he unlatched. "How much can this kid eat?" she asked, her face drooping further. "He was just fed 2 hours ago by me." As she fought to get off the couch in the living room and head to the kitchen, she thought deeply. However, she heard a knock on the door before she could go very far. As she glared at the name the villagers gave the house she and Naruto were staying in, she glanced at the door with more annoyance than curiosity. Who would intentionally visit the demon lair? She thought dryly. Inuzuka Rin. You moved out of the compound not even a year ago and look at you now. A single mother after some one-night fling you met in a 2-bit bar somewhere. What next? Working at a strip club for drug money? She exclaimed as she opened the door, startled by the person on the other side. She then burst out laughing. Sume. How did you know I was here? Rin asked the Inuzuka matriarch, startled. What? Was my adopted little sister trying to hide from me? I know I don't take many showers, but I don't stink that bad, do I? Sume cried mockingly, crossing her arms. Yes, exactly. When Rin was a young girl, Sume's father, the former clan leader, adopted her into the Inuzuka clan. He was a teammate of Rin's father. A year after her birth, her mother passed away from pneumonia, and the Inuzuka leader took her in after her father died in a border battle with the Iwa. Even though her cheek markings indicated that she was not originally a member of the clan, her extended family would still support her as though she were their biological relative. Even though she was adopted, the Inuzuka were taken aback by her gentle and, well, naive nature at times, which demonstrated that she had either not acquired any Inuzuka traits or had acquired the worst of them, which they couldn't determine. Rin tried her hardest to smile at Sume's antics. I bugged the Hokage until he told me where you were. Wasn't too hard considering how much paperwork he's had to do in the last few weeks. She explained as Rin led her inside the house and they sat back in the living room after she noticed her little sister's fatigue and the wriggling blonde form in her arms. Sume went on, so, you're the one the Hokage suckered into raising the little devil spawn, huh? You're not agreeing with those moronic villagers, are you? Rin asked irritably, looking at Sume. Hell no, I don't think he's the Kyuubi demon in baby form, Sume said, waving her away casually. However, that's Kushina's brat, and I do know her. Furthermore, if he turns out to be anything like her when she was younger, in a few months, you're going to be dealing with a true maelstrom. When you combine that with the fact that he has a huge chakra battery to drain. She smiled at her small joke, pun intended. Rin went nearly white. A few months. He was already one when she asked in horror. Oh yeah, when they learn to crawl and explore, that's when they run you wild, Sume said with a knowing nod. Sume said conspiratorially, at this point, you only have to worry about crying for food and stuff. Rin was on the verge of tears, but Sume added, but he's doing it almost constantly. Hannah started by 5 months, and Kiba's already looking at his crib bars funny at 3 months. Hell, I've never slept so little on a S-class mission. Since coming here, I haven't even been able to maintain the house. The baby was upset when she whimpered. As she continued to speak to Rin, Sume lifted him off her lap and held him. Yeah, I kind of noticed when your lawn tried to attack me, she said. Isn't this a B-class mission? Sume asked Rin. Rin quirked an eyebrow at Sume. It's true. Why? Sensing an answer, she inquired, you get paid regularly, don't you? Rin simply nodded when Sume posed another query. Therefore, occasionally hire a Jenin team to assist around the house. I thought they were all being sent on higher class missions. Rin asked, her eyes widening and then narrowing slightly. She wasn't sure if D-rank missions were even feasible for the village at the moment. Sume's expression softened slightly. A little bit, mind you, the Hokage didn't want to risk sending them out of the village for a while, so I'm sure the Hokage would She yelled in surprise when she felt something bite her nipple and looked down to see Naruto latching on. A few of the teams were so mouthed up from the Kyuubi attack, that they're in the village for now. Either their Jonin instructors are dead or they're missing teammates. They managed to cannibalize some of the teams and make out 3 patchwork ones, but without senseis to lead them. Sume pulled him off gently, causing him to fuss once more. Rin waved it off, saying, he does that all the time when he's hungry. Damn, that's right, I was about to feed him before you came. Sume made fun of her sister by saying, let me guess, sucks on the spigot but the tanks are dry nay. Chan? Well sorry I didn't have a kid a few months ago. Rin sneered at the giggling Sume, nearly faulting at the analogy. She pulled up her bra and shirt and said, well, he's in luck today isn't he? Sume was caught off guard when Naruto snatched back on right away, knowing what to do. Geez. Either this kid is hungry as hell or he's a natural-born pervert, she said, laughing and turning back to Rin. Well, here's your chance. Go get your cleaning team while I keep him busy. Rin nodded and seized the opportunity to spend some time outside the house. She left through the door, fought her way out of the yard, and headed for the Hokage Tower. The Tower of the Hokage, after 20 minutes. The Hokage was sitting in the missions office following a bitchy council meeting, another meeting, and a battle over 2 mountains of paperwork. In summary, compared to his other responsibilities, the missions office was calmer and less demanding. As he smoked his pipe, he thought, "It seems to be the closest thing to sleep I can remember getting in the last few days." As was to be expected, there were not many teams arriving for the mission. There weren't enough of them to handle the incoming missions because the majority had already left the village. Others weren't healthy enough to leave the village. He struggled to decide what to do with the disparate Jenin teams. They had no missions to complete inside the village because D-rank missions had been stopped, unless they were an NCDC rank, which was uncommon. Additionally, they had nothing to do and were essentially on standby since no one was available to train them. It's hardly a good way to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. Rin dragged herself into the missions office at that point, looking as though she had just lost a fight with an ugly stick. She held herself as though she had been struck by a tranquilizer dart, her hair was a mess, and there were bloodshot bags under her eyes. The Hokage could only assume that Naruto's appearance was likely similar to hers and that taking care of him must be a full-time job. Knowing that was the reason she was here, he said, "Rin-san. Good to see you out and about. How goes the mission?" The Hokage recoiled at the comparison when she sat down in a chair across from him, looked him in the eyes, and then slammed her head against the table. "The thread shinobi war was easier, Hokage-sama. How difficult could caring for a baby be? He's a full-time job, and Sume's watching him right now, which is why I'm here, Hokage-sama." Rin continued as if she could read his thoughts. "He has an inhuman appetite, bordering on that of a bottomless pit, but he has the energy of a 6-year-old on a sugar high, and a set of lungs that are worse than any alarm clock I've ever heard," she said, raising her head and putting on the most begging face she could manage at the moment. The Hokage wanted to know what she would ask for. His first thought was to find someone else to take Naruto. He was therefore relieved when she said plainly, "I need backup. I can't maintain the house and him. Both are a job and a half themselves. Is there any way for me to get one of the Jenin teams to help me?" Ouch. "Unfortunately, D-rank missions aren't being accepted at the moment, Rin. All of our complete Jenin teams are taking up C-class and B-class missions," Sarutobi said, looking at her as his mind began to work out a solution to a third of a problem. Unbeaten, Rin turned to face him and said, "I heard that there are a couple teams that are on standby." He nodded. "There are, but most of them are still traumatized by the incident and are off the roster. To give them a mission I would have to put them back on and then they would have to fall under the guidelines of the current affairs, meaning they would be sent on C ranks instead of D ranks. Which they are not ready for," he said, getting her ready for it. The Hokage said, "But, if you were to take responsibility for their recovery from their trauma, you could use the help you need as therapy for them." Rin looked dejected at the thought of not receiving any assistance. Rin became alert at that. Aid in their recuperation? And turn household chores into therapy? As the Hokage went on, she pondered. It would also help them bond as a team since they are not the original. You would also have to help them physically train because after they've recovered, they'll be sent on C ranks. I'm sure with 3 other sets of hands, it will be easier to care for Naruto as well while you do this. So to sum it up, you get the help you need, and they start to get back on their feet. Rin enthusiastically nodded at the chance. Overall, it was a fair trade. She readily agreed without giving it much thought. "All right, Hokage-sama, I'll have them ready for C-rank missions and them some. You can count on me," she declared, practically jumping with joy. She was still wiped. In order to release the team to Rin for recuperation, the Hokage had her sign the necessary paperwork. The forms appeared familiar, but then she assumed that all of the forms did. She was never good at bureaucracy. The Hokage nodded to her after signing the final form, saying, "Good luck on your task, Rin. Keep him safe. I'll send them over tomorrow morning then." Rin happily walked back to the house after bowing to the Hokage. The Sandaime began to laugh after Rin left, and eventually their laughter became maniacal. "Damn, I am a genius!" they exclaimed. The Anbu codenamed Inu entered at that moment and said, "Hokage-sama, the council is waiting for you." The Sandaime halted in the middle of his laughter and yelled, "Fail!" as he hurled one of the mission stamps at the Anbu, which struck his head with unimaginable force and rendered him unconscious. He snarled at the unconscious man, "Never interrupt me in my creative moments." With the word failure etched on his forehead. Ready to bust some heads, he repositioned the collar of his Hokage robes, lit his pipe again, and strode past the man and out the door. After 45 minutes, at Rin's house, when Rin got home, she saw Naruto scrunching his right back at her and Sume scrunching her nose at him. Based on some of the things Rin saw while living with Sume back at the clan compound, it would be entirely accurate to say that Sume had a face that only masochists could adore. "What the heck are you doing, Nae-san?" she said, trying to force herself to forget those memories once more. After placing Naruto back in her lap, Sume scrawled sheepishly on her cheek. "Isn't that right, Naru-chan?" she asked, picking him up and placing his face in front of her. He took advantage of this to grab her nose, saying, "Yeesh, Gid's got a grip ohnim do," with a startled expression as she removed him from her nose. "So, how'd it go with the Hokage?" she asked, turning back to Rin, who was drenched in perspiration at the two. Rin began to smile. "I got one of the ones that were on standby, but I couldn't do it as a mission. Instead, the Hokage wanted me to help with their mental rehabilitation and physical training so they're ready for C-ranked missions when they're done. He signed their recovery over to me so they can help with the house," she smiled. "Oh, good to hear. Now you won't have to worry about keeping both the house and Naruto in check. Well, I better get going back to the compound. Why don't you know how those idiots are if I'm not around to lead them? They might blow the whole thing up while I'm away. Take care, Nae-chan, D. Don't get yourself into any more trouble," Sume said, putting on the straightest face she could manage with all the willpower she could muster. As she shut the door behind her, Sume stood up, gave Rin Naruto, and waved to them both. Rin didn't hear the faint sound of uncontrollable laughter coming from down the street because she was too preoccupied with wondering why Sume was stuttering. "Well, now that you're fed and have been up for a while, how about we take a nap?" she said, glancing at Naruto, who was staring back at her as she held him in her arms. In response, he took her nipple in his hand. "Ah," she said, sweating. Rin's residence. The following morning, 9:03 a.m. Poor Rin had yet another sleepless night. Before the Jenin team arrived, she was in the kitchen drinking as much coffee as she could. As much to Rin's relief as her breasts, Naruto kept himself busy by staring at her. She wondered if he was doing it for food or if it was the start of another pervert as she gazed at him in the baby basket. She sincerely wished for the past. She didn't want to contribute to Konoha's growth of another super pervert. He was scarcely present in the village, and Jiraiya was sufficient. A faint knock on the door interrupted her thought process. It must be them, she reasoned as she made her way to the door. When she opened it, she saw something she hoped would never happen again. 3 melancholy looking Jenins returned her gaze, their eyes nearly dead. The fact that she knew 2 of them made it even worse. Hiroshi and Nanami were present. Rin had never seen them in the light before. Despite being short, Nanami had a dark, healthy tan and was clearly athletic. She had shoulder-length brown hair that she managed to tie back into 2 pigtails, and her eyes were brown. In order to be covered by fishnet from her wrist to beneath her armpit, she wore a tight black sleeveless vest that narrowed to her throat and wrapped around her arms and shoulders. A pair of biker shorts and close-toed knee-high boots completed her outfit, which included the same fishnet adorning her knees. Hiroshi was dressed more subtly, wearing only blue shinobi pants and blue sandals and a gray jacket with lots of pockets. All that was visible were bespectacled gray eyes and brown hair. Rin had never seen the last girl before. She had long, curly black hair and strange red eyes that, if not for their current lifeless hue, would probably look exotic. She was dressed in an odd red and white garment that appeared to be bandaged. Her outfit was completed by the headband on her head and a pair of blue sandals. The bags that Rin saw all the Jenin carrying were the one item that worried her the most. As Nanami and Hiroshi stared at Rin, it suddenly occurred to them where they had previously seen her. Both of them threw their arms around the gullible Junin as she collapsed to the ground. Both cried, "Arigato Tanuki-san. They know who I am without my mask," Rin exclaimed, perspiring. "To what extent is my cover awful?" Morbidly, she thought. She whispered angrily at them, "Nanami. Hiroshi. My name is Rin, so don't call me that when I'm not in Anbu uniform, all right?" Before getting off, they both nodded and glanced up at her. "You're welcome, by the way. So you guys are part of the Jenin team that I need to help, huh? And what's your name?" Rin asked the stranger as she raised herself to a sitting position. The girl fidgeted meekly, her crimson eyes shifting to the ground. "The Hokage told us her name is Kurenai, Rin-san," Hiroshi said, interrupting. "Can't she tell me that?" Rin asked Hiroshi. "She hasn't talked since we met her, Rin-san." Hokage Sama said that's part of her problem, Hiroshi simply shrugged. "Traumatized to the point of muteness?" Rin raised an eyebrow in response. She thought grimly. I must have seen something pretty horrible. Well anyways, welcome to my house for now. Rin became curious as they all nodded and picked up their bags. What are the bags for? She asked the Jenin. Hokage. Sama said we were to live here through the period Rin-san, Nanami said, deciding to speak up this time. You are? But what about your families, won't they miss you? Rin asked, raising her eyebrows. Neither of us have families. Hiroshi and I came from the same orphanage and joined the academy at the same time, said Nanami, who appeared even more depressed than Hiroshi. As far as we can tell, Kurenai-san also has no parents, Nanami said to Rin in a melancholy tone. Oh. Gomen, Rin apologized softly, feeling bad about bringing it up. Hiroshi and Nanami shook their heads, and Hiroshi said simply, no worries, it's not like we knew them anyways. Well, I should invite you to your new home I guess. It's kind of a sty right now, which is what I was hoping you guys could help me with, Rin said to the Jenin as they entered the house after nodding and eventually getting back up and brushing herself off. To put it mildly, Nanami thought this was strange. How hard can it be to maintain a house Rin-san? She inquired. Didn't the Hokage tell you the details of my mission? Rin asked, turning to face her new charge. We didn't even know you were on a mission Rin-san, Hiroshi said, as the three Jenin shook their heads. As she led them to the kitchen, Rin thought crudely, oh fucking great. Well, I am, and now you are too. I'll show him to you, she said. Nanami raised an eyebrow and said, him? But Rin did not answer, as she was focusing on what appeared to be a baby basket on the table. Rin turned to look at the Jenin on the table next to her with the basket. He is my mission, she said, pointing to it. The Jenin approached the table, craned their necks to peer into the basket, and went white when they saw the blue-eyed, whiskered blonde baby staring at them. Holy shit. Jia, gasp. Nanami, Hiroshi, and Kurenai reacted as they found their way against the counter cabinets on the other side of the kitchen in the blink of an eye. Hiroshi pointed a shaky finger at the basket where Naruto was giggling happily at the funny new people, the baby Kyuubi. He yelled, his face displaying horror. This is Uzumaki Naruto, the baby the Yondaime used to seal the Kyuubi, and my mission is to take care of him for the first year or so, Rin said, raising an eyebrow at the Jenin, who was still standing next to the baby basket. Well, at least it's fear instead of hate, she thought as she spoke to the Jenin. But he'll kill us. Nanami was the next to say. She said, still looking fearfully at the basket, even as Rin picked up the wiggling infant. Yes. He hasn't killed me in the 3 weeks I've been caring for him, she shot back. But the villagers said. The peasants? When did the locals start to know so much about the shinobi arts? Particularly advanced fuinjutsu. Do you know how it works? Rin interrupted Nanami, saying, don't believe the villagers, they're just a bunch of ignorant morons looking to put the blame on something. Rin shrugged, a little bit, in response to Hiroshi's doubtful question. Although I'm not as knowledgeable about seals as Minato Sensei was, he was still able to impart a significant amount of knowledge to me, she said. The Jenin smashed against the cabinets once more and pointed at Naruto with terrified expressions as Naruto clamped down on Rin's breast out of hunger. Rin-san. He's attempting to devour you, Nanami and Hiroshi screamed. Kurenai just stood there looking back at the Jenin. Rin facepalmed. Baka's milk from the mother's breasts is what babies eat. How did you pass the academy's sex education course without being aware of that? I wasn't really listening, I was staring at the breasts in the picture and made a comment to Nanami and she got us in trouble, Hiroshi said, scratching his temple sheepishly. What he left out was completed by Nanami, who was busy squeezing her tiny breasts and wondering how milk got out of them. You mentioned that I should remove my top so you could compare notes. Sitting in the hall was worth the gut punch. Rin decided to wrap it up by telling the Jenin, anyways, now that you know Naruto isn't going to kill you, posses you, or eat you, I'm going to feed him and then get you situated in. She said this heatedly, which caused them to argue back and forth. As she was doing so, the Jenin crept back up to the basket to gaze at Naruto. Oh, for Kami's sake guys, he's not gonna lunge out at you, Rin said behind them, frightening them more than the baby did, as he lay in his basket flailing his arms around and making his typical baby noises until he made one that was so loud that it made the Jenin flinch. Rin picked up Naruto and pushed him into Nanami's arms as she stammered out a protest, then handed her the bottle and said, you guys are going to help feed him every now so you might as well start now. Reluctantly, Nanami fed Naruto while the others looked on. They were clearly at ease with the young blonde baby, beginning to realize that he was not going to take their souls anytime soon. As Naruto began to fuss once more after Nanami finished feeding him, She became alarmed and asked, what do I do? Rin helpfully added, you have to burp him. Put him against your shoulder and pat his back. When Nanami finally heard a little burpa and something running down her shoulder, she put the baby to her shoulder and patted him. What is that? Get it off, get it off, get it off. While taking Naruto from the still green looking Nanami, Rin, who was laughing at the familiar situation, picked up some paper towels and went over to the Jenin to wipe off the baby spit up. Relax, it's just milk and baby bile. Nothing serious. Alright. Now that that's taken care of, let's put him up for a nap and assign rooms, Rin said. She escorted them up to the baby room with Naruto in tow and explained the baby responsibilities that would need to be divided between them. There's only 2 rooms, so we'll have to split up the boys and girls. This is the room I've been using, so I guess it will be the girls' room. Rin said sheepishly as the Jenin entered the bedroom she had been using, Naruto dozing. The Jenin stared incredulously at the heart-shaped bed with red satin sheets. Kurenai flicked a switch to turn on the lights, but instead the room filled with red disco light and romantic music emanating from concealed speakers. Rin, who was sweating, quickly turned off the switch again. Yeah, the lights are this switch here, she said embarrassingly as she turned on the lights, only to light up Hiroshi, who was searching the closet. Hey guys, look, he exclaimed as he emerged from the closet, wearing a black leather hood. I'm a Mexican wrestler, he said, striking a wrestler pose. Rin was waving her arms at Hiroshi when the 2 Jenin Kunoichi turned to look at her. Take that off and put it back, you shouldn't be in other people's stuff, she reprimanded, but it wasn't very effective given her full-face blush. Hentai, declared Nanami, pointing to Rin, and Kurenai nodded. This isn't my house guys, I'm only using it for the mission. That stuff was here before I got here, Rin defended herself, sweating and attempting to reason with the 2 Kunoichi. With her hands on her hips, Nanami questioned doubtfully, oh really? Who owns it then? Jiraiya? Rin said plainly. Oh, was said by Nanami after blinking a few times, and Kurenai nodded with a similar understanding expression. Rin started to perspire once more. Really? Isn't even the Jenin aware of his perversion? Anyway, since the bed is, well, big enough for 3 people, we can sleep here and Hiroshi gets the smaller bedroom, she thought before clearing her throat. Actually Rin-san, I can sleep in Hiroshi's room and you and Kurenai can sleep in this room, Nanami said again, not even blushing. She said incredulously, What, you guys can't do that, you're too young. As her eyes grew to the size of dinner plates, after finally coming out of the closet, Hiroshi shrugged and said to Rin, we've been sharing a room since the orphanage, so I don't see what's wrong with it. Rin retorted, unconvinced, but you're a boy and a girl. There's definitely something wrong with it. Rin-san, Nanami said nonchalantly, we've been changing in front of each other since we were 6. It's nothing we haven't seen before. Or mind seeing again. Hiroshi decided to add his 2 cents with a cunning smirk and a wag of his eyebrows. He made fun of Nanami and got him elbowed in the gut, which he took and continued to laugh at. A childhood couple? Rin shook her head at their argument. Oh well. She gave in and teased them simultaneously, making Jenin choke and blush. Okay, fine. I won't separate you 2 lovebirds. If you want to share a room, it's fine by me, she said. Alright. Now that that's settled, grab your stuff and put it in your rooms, then meet me back downstairs. We have some cleanup to do, Rin said with a smirk. Rin saw the Jenin arranged in a line a few minutes later. Rin began removing her gaze from the Jenin and using her hand to draw their attention to the filthy house, saying, Alright guys, as you can see, this place is a mess. I will be taking a nap as I haven't had much sleep the last 3 weeks. Before I give you guys your jobs, are there any questions? She said, closing her eyes and visualizing herself dozing off. I have a single sensei, Hiroshi said. What is it, Hiro? Rin asked the shinobi as she emerged from her tiny fantasy world. Her mind froze, and she turned white as she gazed at the Jenin. With a black lacy patch of material covering his eye, he questioned, why are there eye patches on the floor? Rin's brain unfrozen, and she yelled at the Jenin, Hiroshi. That's my dirty underwear. Really? It's just a patch of cloth and a lot of string. Hiroshi exclaimed incredulously as he pulled it off his head and examined it. His eyes widened. Why don't you wear these? He pouted as he turned to Nanami, making her blush and stutter. Rin yelled, Give me those, and grabbed her filthy thong from his grasp. Hey, even though she's only 17, she was 17, damn it. Hiroshi. Your job is to tame the yard. She yelled, pointing to the door, as she fixed her intense gaze on the source of her headache. Hiroshi gave a salute and quickly left the area. Rin began, Nanami. And threw the thong at the girl who caught them with a horrified expression. You do laundry. Go. Rin yelled, making Nanami forget that she was holding a pair of underwear. Hi. Gah. She cried after saluting, flinging the thong directly in her face. She hurried away and began gathering the filthy clothes that were scattered across the floor. Rin turned to face the final Jenin and said, Kurenai. Clean the kitchen up. Her voice was softer than the others. Kurenai gave a nod and went off to finish the task. At last, with all the Jenin working, Rin sighed with relief and collapsed like a stone anchor on the couch. Before she heard how Hiroshi was doing outside, she thought, time for a nap. Good lawn. Nice lawn. Happy lawn. No wait, bad lawn. Bad lawn. Stay away. Get away from me, GAHHH. As she fell asleep, Rin thought, definitely time for a nap. Rin had been asleep for 3 hours. In the past month, Rin must have slept for the longest period of time ever. The sounds of a body striking the floor in front of her roused her. Hiroshi was lying face down on the floor in front of her when she opened her eyes. He flatly told Rin, lawn's dead, as she got up from the couch. She opened the front door and peered out at the lawn, which was covered in large bare spots. She questioned the half-dead Jenin. What the hell happened? Why are there bare spots everywhere? His head turned toward her, and he said, that's because I had to deroot those monsters that were disguised as weeds. Grass seed would be a good purchase. Rin was presenting the boy in a prostrate position with Ryo notes a moment later. Now? He asked, giving her a suspicious look. Rin simply gave a nod. He drugged himself back up, sighing with exhaustion. He picked up the Ryo notes and left the room. Rin reasoned that now would be a good time to check on the other Jenin. She was amazed to see how immaculate the kitchen was. Had Kurenai not been sitting at the table, gazing cloudily at the empty center, she would have complimented the girl. She might be far beyond my capabilities. Isn't a therapist supposed to be assisting her? As Rin gazed at the girl, she thought. She shocked the girl out of her reverie by saying out loud, good job, Kurenai. Chan. Will you mind helping Hiroshi sow the lawn when he returns from the store? Kurenai merely gave her a brief glance before nodding and heading to meet him when he returned. Rin sighed. 2 down, 1 to go. She proceeded to the laundry room. When she finally noticed Rin in the room, Nanami eeped and leapt off the washing machine with a furious blush, saying, you. This is the last L. Load. So I'm gonna help Farashi goodbye. She arrived to find piles of clean clothes and a glazed Nanami sitting on top of the machine while it was on spin cycle. Nanami jumbled while racing out of the laundry room. Rin was still staring at the washer. Finally curiosity got the best of her and she got on. Not feeling anything for a while until, wow, she quickly jumped off the machine. Okay. She stammered to herself, heh, and then she left the laundry room, her cheeks flushed. Rin decided to see how Naruto was doing before the Jenin finished, so she went up to the baby room after readjusting her pants. She went back downstairs with Naruto in tow after changing out the enormous load that he had made. She found the Jenin waiting for her, finished resewing. All right, you guys, who can cook? I can. Rin.san was the only one to raise his hand. No you can't. The only thing you made in the orphanage kitchen was a fire. Nanami said, staring at him incredulously. I put it out, he said, shrugging as if it were nothing. You made it worse, she exclaimed as she stared at him in disbelief. Worse? Or better? Hiroshi asked, smugly glancing at her as he polished his fingernails. Nanami felt compelled to give her a forehead slap. You will not ever cook, was the first thing Rin decided to say, causing Hiroshi's shoulders to slump. Rin let out a sigh and said, I suppose I'll be the cook then. Nanami, Kurenai, you assist me. Hiroshi, you set the table. Let's prepare some lunch. After nodding, all three went to work. After a while, Naruto received baby formula while they sat down to enjoy green tea with yakitori and tsukemono. Following a resounding itadakimasu, everyone dove in. It was a pleasant surprise to the Jenin. Rin.san was a talented chef, Nanami exclaimed. Sugoi. This is better than anything I've ever had. Hiroshi nodded in agreement and stuffed the food into his mouth as quickly as he could. But Kurenai merely nodded and ate slowly. Rin grinned at the praise. She didn't get to prepare meals for people other than herself very often. Rin made the decision to learn more about her charges after the main meal was finished. She said to the Jenin, well, guys, after we've eaten, how about we tell each other more about ourselves? Nanami looked up. Rin-san. Could you be more specific about what you want us to tell you? Oh well, your likes, dislikes, hobbies, goals. Also, considering I need to help you guys get back on your feet, your shinobi skills, what you need to work on, and more importantly, what the hell happened? Rin asked, striking a contemplative pose before continuing. Kurenai appeared to hunker in on herself, while Hiroshi and Nanami sagged, understanding the meaning of the final part of her summary. I guess I'll start then, Hiroshi reluctantly agreed. Well, I'm Hiroshi. No last name. I like puzzles, geography, tonkatsu, and my best friend Nanami-chan. I dislike sashimi, prudes, and people who are full of themselves. My goal is to become an elite Junin. My skills are in strategy, kenjutsu, and traps. I don't know many ninjutsu. My taijutsu is average, and my genjutsu is next to none. Well, the reason Nanami-chan and I are here is because our Jonin sensei and third teammate were killed when a bunch of trees went down that night. And we kinda have a few problems left over from that incident that happened. By the end, he had lowered himself to a mumble, but Rin was fully aware of the incident they were discussing. You would definitely run into issues if a giant demon fox were to bear down on you in that manner. Rin turned to face Nanami, who was looking at the table gravely. Rin said softly, Nanami, how about you next? Nanami glanced up at her and reluctantly nodded, my name's just Nanami. I like exercise, swimming, sukiyaki, and my best friend Hiroshi-kun. I dislike fangirls, people who are full of themselves, and sushi. My goal is to become an expert in taijutsu and a Junin. My skills are taijutsu, short-range ninjutsu, and a little genjutsu. I could use work on more genjutsu, some longer-range ninjutsu, and I can always work on my taijutsu. I'm here because of the same reason as Hiroshi-kun, she finished quietly. Rin simply glanced at Kurenai and nodded. The red-eyed Jenin was asked, can you speak to us, Kurenai-chan? Or don't you feel up to it? She shook her head no, seemingly sinking into her chair. Sandame Sama said this was her basic information. Rin-san, said Hiroshi thoughtfully before taking a piece of paper out of his pocket and giving it to Rin. Rin unfolded it and read it out loud. Yuhi Kurenai. 14. No surviving family members. Expertise in tracking and genjutsu. Shortcomings in ninjutsu and taijutsu. The only Team Himiko member still alive. Is that all right, Kurenai-chan? She questioned the teenager. Rin nodded back, deciding it wouldn't hurt to share a little about herself with them. Kurenai simply nodded, her eyes gazing past them all as though she were reliving the events in her mind. Well, I suppose I should tell you about myself as well, Rin said. My name is Rin Inuzuka. I was not born in Inuzuka. As you two are already aware, I was a member of Team Minato and am currently serving as a medic.nin in Anbu. I enjoy yakizakana, gardening, and herbology. Arrogance, prejudice, and doubting Minato Sensei's work are things I dislike, and I'm not a huge admirer of bureaucracy. In addition to my expertise in defensive genjutsu and taijutsu, my specialty is medical jutsu. My actual area of weakness is ninjutsu. You guys assist me in keeping an eye on Naruto and the house, but aside from the mission, I have to get you back to snuff. As Rin concluded, the Jenin gave her a doubtful glance. Not only will I be helping you recover mentally, but I will be physically preparing you for C-rank mission after your psych eval is clear, so I hope you brought your shinobi gear with you, Rin said. What's the matter? Looking at the hesitation in their faces, she asked the Jenin. Nanami chose to speak on their behalf, saying glumly, they took away all our kunai and shuriken for standard suicide prevention. Rin frowned as she expressed her opinion, saying, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. For Kami's sake, you are a shinobi. You could snap your own neck if you truly wanted to end your life. Your trap wire was not even taken, did they? Looping it around your neck and jumping off of something would be easy and would cut your he. Rin-san. But stop it, arigato. Nanami shouted at the morbidly rambling Junin while waving her hands in front of her to get her attention. Rin refocused on the Jenin to see them as white as ghosts. She sheepishly scratched her cheek. Gomen. I do that occasionally. In any case, won't we need to get you more kunai and shuriken? I don't think you're suicidal, so that's over. Tomorrow, we'll worry about that. Before dinner, let's finish a few more tasks around the house. I'll prepare dinner and supervise Naruto. Hiroshi, please finish the living room. Do the bathroom, Nanami. Before they moved out, she gave the Jenin the order, Kurenai-chan, clean the hallways and the bedrooms. They nodded. Before clearing the table, Rin let out a satisfied sigh and turned to face Naruto, who was watching everything from his basket. "What do you think of them, Naru-chan?" she asked. She asked the lively infant. He just scrunched his face at her, getting a chuckle from Rin. "It's too soon to tell. More for herself than the baby," she told Naruto, "even though I can already see some of their personality quirks." After a few hours, Rin was shocked to see that the house was clean once more and no dirt, no used diapers, no filthy clothes, no overflowing trasha, but she was putting dinner on the table, and the Jenin, who had completed their tasks, were staring at the food like wolves, while Hiroshi was staring at it like a desert victim is staring at water. Is that Shabu? Shabu?" he said, beginning to cry. Rin shivered. "Yeah, it's Ga." Rin always had a talent for cooking, but she never really got to do much of it while she was in Anbu. She yelled as Nanami and Hiroshi jumped on and gushed. Cooking for oneself was also a little depressing, so even though the Jenin's attention made her nervous, she definitely enjoyed knowing that her food was appreciated. They didn't even wait for Rin to finish before starting to eat. "Sit down and eat, guys, because this is all the beef I bought." Rin and Kurenai sat down and began eating more slowly, which didn't last long as they fought Nanami and Hiroshi for their portion of the pot. It was time for bed sooner than they had anticipated, and after taking turns in the two bathrooms and practicing nighttime rituals, Rin and Hiroshi entered one bedroom while Rin and Kurenai entered the other. Rin spent the remainder of the evening trying to appease the force that was Naruto, while the Jenin chose to watch it, that is, they were forced to watch so they could do it later. After turning off the lights and hearing a buzzing sound coming from the closet, which, to Rin's dismay, turned out to be a female personal massaging device that Hiroshi must have unintentionally turned on in his search, it was very awkward to get into a heart-shaped bed with a 13-year-old kunoichi. After a little blushing, the two were finally able to settle in on the large bed, which allowed Rin to consider the new twist in her predicament. Now that she was in charge of 3 traumatized Jenin and a baby with the strongest biju in its gut, she decided to count herself lucky that they weren't as traumatized as it was intended to appear. However, upon reflection, she hadn't noticed much trauma in the Jenin. The room of Nanami and Hiroshi. Hiroshi was sleeping inches away from Nanami, who was very comfortable because they had been sharing a bed since they were 8 years old. Hiroshi fell asleep like a log while Nanami listened to the crickets outside chirping, and then all of a sudden, the light from the window seemed to darken. Nanami became rigid and turned to face the window, but her fear only increased when she saw a giant demonic red eye staring back at her, and whatever it was began to growl. Nanami's breath caught in her throat before the creature let out a vicious roar, and then the room burst into flames. The room of Rin and Kurenai. Rin heard a blood-curdling scream from Nanami in Hiroshi's room. She shot out of bed and darted towards the room. When she opened the door, she found Nanami bawling her eyes out in Hiroshi's arms as he tried to comfort her. "What was that?" Rin asked the only composed Jenin in the room. Hiroshi just said it straight, "Another night of terror." For a few weeks now, she has been experiencing them. Nanami just kept crying and mumbling incoherently, and Rin heard Naruto crying, indicating that the scream must have woken him up. "She'll calm down after a while," Rin said, nodding as her shoulders slumped. Nightmares. So much for being lucky, she thought, wondering how she was going to fix this. After a while, she went to check on the baby, wondering why Nanami and Hiroshi were sharing a bed. When the sobs seemed to stop and Naruto was back to sleep, Rin returned to her room, where she was greeted by the trembling Kurenai and the occasional sniffle, which indicated that she must also be crying. Her final thought was, "This may be harder than I thought," which made her get into bed beside Kurenai and try to put her to sleep. 8 a.m. the following day. Sitting at the kitchen table, Rin gazed at the still slumbering baby in his basket and yawned for a long time. From the opposite side of the story, 3 yawns were heard. Rin gazed languidly at the Jenin who slept just as much as she did. None of them had the most restful sleep the night before. Naruto woke up and started crying. Rin was wide awake in her room, and Nanami woke up screaming 2 more times before Hiroshi calmed her down. Kurenai had just as many nightmares and physically expressed them by tossing and turning, but she didn't wake up screaming. Rin lowered her head to the table and thought gloomily, "I ask for help, and I get more problems." As she slowly sank in on herself, Nanami spoke up, feeling that she was the root of all of their issues. I'm really sorry guys. I know that thing is locked up, but I keep having those nightmares." Rin raised her head to observe the ashamed kunoichi and then sighed, "I guess that's what I signed up to fix, so I should have known what I was getting myself into. Well, gradually work on trying to get over your issues. In the meantime, we'll also be doing physical training." "Ah, that's right. First we need to go shopping for weapon replacements." We'll do that after breakfast. What's for breakfast, Rin-san? Hiroshi asked excitedly as he perked up. It would be a dream come true if the meals from yesterday were any indication. Rin grinned, stood up, and moved toward a cabinet. As she walked back, she picked up a box of cereal and placed it firmly on the table in front of the wilting Jenin. With a pout, Hiroshi questioned incredulously, "You want me to eat this peasant food after eating food made by a goddess?" Rin laughed. "You keep talking like that, Gaki, and I'll start thinking you're flirting with me. I'll say anything you want if it gets me a better breakfast," Hiroshi said with a sly smirk on his face. She sighed. "The day I start cooking breakfast is the day you three stop waking me up in the middle of the night and I finally get a full 8 hours of sleep. Until then, you're eating peasant food in the morning. Now eat up, we have crap to do today." She did not allow for debate. An hour later, Rin was strolling through town with Naruto in the basket and the 3 Jenin following her. She had changed from her casual attire to her former Junin uniform. Not the loose garments she used to wear as a Chunin. She wore an olive green jacket over a short, sleeved mesh shirt and a black tube top underneath. She was dressed in sandal boots that ended halfway up her shin and light brown shorts that fell just above her knees. To put it another way, Rin had a similar appearance to an Inuzuka but a less menacing scowl. The group soon realized why the little blonde bundle in the basket was receiving glares from the nearby civilians as they continued down the road. When the Genins began to hear rumors of demon lovers and similar things from those around them, they attempted to hide. Rin began leaking murderous intent at the foolish fools after noticing the Genin's uneasiness and the villagers' whispers. Unexpectedly, someone responded to the murderer's intent and looked into it, revealing himself to the group. The dragon. Masked Danbu said, "Rin? Why the hell are you venting so much ki at civilians?" In a perplexed manner. "Just preventing any incidents from a group of foolish people. What about you? They only put you on village patrol?" Rin said with a very menacingly sweet smile. As he noticed the 3 Genin peeking out from behind Rin, Dragon laughed sarcastically and said, "No. I'm just on the mandatory 3-day break between S-rank missions. Pretty much a working holiday before getting thrown back into the Viper Pit." I thought you were only looking over 1 kid. How do you end up with 3 brats and a baby?" he asked the perspiring Junin. "Oh. Who are you calling a brat?" Nanami said, a vein bulging on her head. As the girl lunged at the amused Anbu, Rin swiftly grabbed the back of her shirt. Dragon approached the restrained Jenin while she was still swinging and prodded her nose, saying, "Seems you got a Yamaneko among them as well, WOAH. He just managed to get his finger off of her before she attempted to bite it." Rin asked bluntly, "Don't you have anything better to do than harass my charges, Dragon?" "Not really. My shift is pretty much over, so I was." Dragon waved it away. "All right, you can come along and keep an eye on Naruto for a while," Rin said, pushing the basket into his arms. Dragon appeared to want to object, but after glancing at Rin's unkempt appearance, he realized it would be like prodding a beehive. He looked at the infant and said, "Doesn't look like the evil creature the rest of the village makes him out to be." His shoulders sagged as he began to walk with the group. With a startled expression, Rin snorted, "I'll let you change his diaper something." "Wait, the whole village knows?" Dragon glanced back at her. "Yeah, one of the civilian council members blabbed and got his head chopped off, but the damage was already done. Though, from what I've heard, one of the shinobi off the battlefield spread the news around before the Sandane even made it law," she was told. "You don't think Inu?" Rin asked, her expression darkening as her brows furrowed in thought. Despite the mask, Dragon appeared to be as well. Honestly, Rin, with how he was acting, I wouldn't put it past him. The thought of her former teammate made Rin shudder in disgust. The other 2 Genin were openly staring at Dragon, who was occupied with the still, simmering Nanami. With a sly smile beneath his mask, he reached for it and removed it to show them his scary face no jutsu. As he lowered his mask again, they all let out a gasp of terror and positioned Rin between them. The phrase, "You aren't supposed to show your face, Dragon," made Rin laugh. He simply replied with a grin, "I don't care, it was worth it. And if anybody wants to put that face in their bingo books, more power to them." Then he went back to focusing on the baby basket he was carrying. They arrived at a weapons store that Rin often visited 10 minutes later. "Do you want to wait out here? I'm sure you don't want to argue with the owner about Naruto," she said humbly to Dragon before she went inside. "I haven't slept since yesterday," Dragon said, waving her away. Rin gave him a perplexed look and said, What?" But he had already entered the store. Rin simply waved the Jenin into the store and shrugged it off. In front of the store clerk, she discovered Dragon in the store placing the baby basket on the counter. He commanded, "Clerk.San. Look at this," to the bewildered clerk. Dragon ordered, "Now look at me." The clerk was pale when he saw what was in the basket and pointed, but he was interrupted before he could say anything. "Now look back at the baby," the pale clerk said, turning to face the menacing looking Anbu. The baby, wriggling in the basket and looking around, caught the clerk's attention again. Dragon commanded once more, "Now look at me." The Anbu's masked face was 4 inches from the clerk's own when he turned to face him again. The apparently insane Anbu asked, "Now, who seems more life-threatening? Be honest now," as Dragon jerked his head to the side and let out a stray crack from his neck. "Why don't you?" the clerk asked, pointing a shaky finger at the Anbu. After what seemed like minutes of silence during which he stared at the clerk, the Anbu threw back his head and laughed heartily before ruffling the clerk's hair and saying, "You're a smart guy. I like smart guys," before returning to the group of people who were stunned and asking, "Weren't you going to shop?" Yeah," Rin said, shaking off her daze. She turned to face the still staring Jenin and took out the stipend she had generously received from the Hokage for training costs. "Okay guys, kunai and shuriken, at least 3 sets of each. Don't go blowing the rest on explosive tags," she said. Breaking out of his reverie, Hiroshi grabbed his wound and scurried off to survey the lines of weapons. After taking hers, Nanami left to watch Hiroshi. Kurenai took hers in silence and headed straight for the shuriken and kunai sets. Dragon casually remarked, "Maybe you should consider a weapon, Rin," as he glanced at Naginata as the two of them strolled through the islands. As she held her hand in front of her face in karate chop form, Rin simply shook her head and replied, "Don't need one. When you're a medic.nin like me, your hands are just as deadly as any weapon." "That nasty little technique I've had the fortune of not coming up against yet," said Dragon, with a contemplative expression before nodding in comprehension. As they continued their conversation, someone else casually entered the store and then noticed the 2 Anbu members carrying a basket as they left an aisle. The tension between the 3 was as thick as fog, and Rin and Dragon came to a halt just as quickly, gazing at their squadmate Kakashi. Kakashi's gaze shifted to ice as he looked at the basket. "You have something to say, Kakashi?" Rin asked in a menacing tone as her brow furrowed and her eyes narrowed. He simply dismissed the threat with a patronizing glance, saying, "No, I don't. In fact, I was just leaving." He then turned around and left the store again. When the 2 adults felt the key leaking from their caregiver during their standoff, they were unaware that the Jenin had returned. Rin.San, who was that?" Nanami asked warily. "That was someone you shouldn't trust. If you see him anywhere by the house, or if he tries talking to you, tell me, all right?" Rin corrected them after noticing how she looked at the Jenin. The Jenin nodded, taking note of Rin's serious tone. Rin gave a satisfied nod in return, exhaled, and then looked at Hiroshi's belongings. She pointed to 2 tiny rods with what looked like rubber grips and asked, "What are those?" "These?" Hiroshi asked, setting down his other belongings and holding one in each hand as if he had become more alert. The rods telescoped and tripled in length as both arms swung downward. Hiroshi laughed. "They're telescoping batons. Nice and heavy and a hell of a lot cooler than those used tonfa I was using. I can even make hidden pockets in my sleeves to conceal them," he exclaimed with delight. "I thought you said you were a kenjutsu user?" Rin thought, strange weapons for a shinobi. With a hint of sarcasm, Hiroshi shrugged and asked, "What else was I supposed to call it? Donkajutsu?" Dragon grabbed one of the batons from Hiroshi and tried it out while Rin scratched her cheek sheepishly. As he returned it, he told the Jenin, "It's not a clean kill weapon, but with its weight, it would sure put someone in a world of hurt." Rin sighed, "Well, it's not explosive tags, so I guess it works. All right, pay for your stuff and meet me outside." Dragon waved to the cautious clerk as Rin took the basket from him and they walked out of the store. After a few minutes, the Jenin emerged from the store, the group returned to an empty training area, and Dragon went to sleep at last. Ground for Training 16. Rin warmed up by stretching and placing Naruto's basket beneath a tree. "All right guys, we'll start with a warm-up. 5 laps around the field, then 50 jumping jacks, 50 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 crunches. Then after that, I want to see what you guys can do," she said clearly. Hiroshi and Kurenai went pale as Nanami nodded enthusiastically. An hour later, Hiroshi and Kurenai were out of breath, while Nanami panted, happy that she could now exercise. "Well shit guys, this was just a warm-up. I don't know what your routine was before, but it obviously sucked." Rin shook her head at the half-dead Jenin as she calmed down. Rin stood before them after the Jenin had caught their breath. All right guys, I want a grasp on your genjutsu and ninjutsu arsenal. Let's start with you Hiroshi, she said, turning to face the boy. With an embarrassing, I only know the mandatory 5 basics from the academy, response, the boy scratched his nose. 5, I thought there was still 6 mandatory. Which ones do you know? Rin asked, raising her eyebrows. Using his fingers, Hiroshi enumerated them. Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement, Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker. Bunshin no Jutsu, clone. Henge no Jutsu, transformation. And Nawanuke no Jutsu, rope escape. Rin was only able to pinch her nose in dissatisfaction. They removed the mandate from Karorimino no Jutsu. Cloak of invisibility. What the hell is wrong with them? Lowering the standards in the academy will lead to cannon fodder getting through and Jenin not being ready for their first C rank. Nanami chose to voice her opinion, and the rest of her team agreed with her when she said, at least it's still keeping out all the fangirls. They were all aware of what fangirls were. Dead fangirls, rape victims, or even dead squads were the equivalent of fangirls extremely weak and useless kunoichi. Rin wished that the day when fangirls began to flood the ranks would never come. Rin looked at the girl and cleared her throat before asking, anyways, how about you Nanami? I know the basic academy 5, plus Megan. Narukumi no Jutsu, demonic illusion. Hell viewing technique. Plus Doden. Doryuheki no Jutsu, earth style wall, and Doden. Iwagakure no Jutsu. Earth style. Hidden among rocks. Nanami concluded proudly, seemingly having recovered from their earlier reflections. Rin was taken aback by the Jenin, who had a B-rank defensive jutsu in her arsenal. Can you show me the final 2? She asked the Jenin. Nanami nodded before going through 3 hand signs ending on dog. Doryuheki. Before her cheeks swelled and she began to spew out a lot of mud, which formed a huge rock wall in front of her, she declared, clamped her hands into another sign, and then walked with her back against the wall, sinking or blending into it. Rin was impressed when she reappeared on the opposite side of the wall. She had a firm grasp of Doden techniques and used a precise amount of chakra, which was impressive for a taijutsu fighter. Rin assumed that the girl had low reserves, and this was confirmed when Nanami left the wall and sat down to catch her breath. I'm impressed. Where did you find those? She questioned the weary girl. Our old sensei figured I could incorporate them into my taijutsu and also play a defensive role for the group, Nanami said with a proud smile that wavered slightly when asked where she got them. Rin nodded in agreement, adding, Doden is one of the most defensive affinities and can be a blessing when fighting particularly dangerous fighters. She said, take me, for instance, as the Jenin gave her a perplexed look. This is the chakra scalpel, she said, raising one hand in front of her and a bluish, white aura surrounding it. For a medic nin like me, it's a very helpful technique because it enables me to perform surgeries without even breaking the skin. It can be used in combat, but it requires a lot of practice. I can damage internal organs, sever muscles, nerves, and blood vessels simply by touching a particular area of your body, all without even scratching your skin. She told the girl, who was now staring at her in wonder, that having a Doden technique take a blow for you rather than blocking a strike can mean the difference between life and death. That's as deadly as the Hyuga clan's Jukin. Rin.san. Can you teach me that? The youthful kunoichi inquired, her voice full of hope. Rin said, perspiring from the girl's intense admiration. The technique could only be used correctly by someone with medic training, she said gently to the Jenin. Nanami's confidence slightly dropped before a fresh resolve came to her eyes. Then I can become the squad's medic. As the group's defensive member and primary taijutsu fighter, I could pick up medical jutsu to play a different role. The Jenin stated excitedly. Rin quirked an eyebrow at this. Usually medic. Nins were dedicated healers and frowned upon filling multiple roles, since they were supposed to heal, not fight. Rin didn't want to shoot down the girl's enthusiasm, but she had to know what she was getting into. It's a lot of work and expertise. Additionally, even though you have great chakra control, you have a low reserve, so juggling 3 roles would be extremely difficult. Additionally, medic. Nins are typically committed to their work, she told the kunoichi. With an arrogant smile, Nanami said, well, that's what we're training for, isn't it Rin.san? All I need to do is practice my taijutsu and build up my reserves. I am capable of serving as the team's multi-role field medic. I've never seen that much vigor in the girl. Maybe it will help her get over her problems, even if she doesn't make it all the way. And even if she didn't make it all the way, she would still be able to treat wounds, she said as if it were easy. Rin considered her options and decided to nod. All right, but before I even teach you how to use the chakra scalpel, I want you to be able to name off every part of the body and be able to heal a person. You understand that I also want your reserves to be tripled by then? She gave the order. With excitement still in her eyes, Nanami sprang to her feet and slurped Rin, saying, "Hi Rin. Sensei." Rin was taken aback by this and assumed that she shouldn't be because she was teaching and training them, even if it was only temporary. Anyway, now our unique situation, she said, turning to face Kurenai, who appeared especially distressed. Kurenai. Chan, I want you to use the genjutsu that you know on me. Rin assured her, I'm a Junin Kurenai. Chan, I will be able to get out of anything you can throw at me. Kurenai appeared to pout at Rin's reassurances, before going through hand signals and glaring at Rin. The wind picked up briefly before Rin found herself in the training field by herself. Megan. Nikoni Arizu no Jutsu, Demon Illusion. False Surroundings Technique, Rin said, nodding to herself. An excellent starting point for genjutsu practitioners. Kai, she shouted, dispelling the genjutsu. Kurenai was a little taken aback, not because Rin was exempt, but because she could recognize the genjutsu she used so effortlessly. Feeling a little irritated, she instantly went through the hand signs for her other genjutsu, ending on Ox, attacking Rin with flower petals that reformed into Kurenai, who had her arms wrapped around Rin. Sen's Waista a Tanuki statue. Her bewilderment subsided when she noticed a flash appear next to her and turned to see Rin clutching a camera while grinning broadly. That must be the cutest thing I've ever seen, Chan. Of course Rin was trying to see if anger could get the kunoichi out of her impression of a monk, but apparently it didn't work, as Kurenai stomped back over to the other two genin, who quickly stifled their giggles, and sat down in a huff. The Jonin cooed, this time taking a picture of the raven-haired girl with clenched teeth, balled fists, and fire burning in her eyes. Rin stopped laughing and said, Kurenai-chan, please stop acting that way. In fact, I'm quite impressed. It's been a long time since I've seen that genjutsu used. Am I right about genjutsu? Hanachiri Nuko, genjutsu. Flower petal escape. You know Kurenai, it would have been stronger if you would have been able to proclaim the jutsu, Rin said, hoping the genin would try to speak more quickly. Rin. Sensei, why is it that some jutsus require hand seals and announcements and some don't? She asked the cooling genin, who nodded her head with a cute little pout. He inquired inquisitively. Rin cheerfully responded, Hiroshi.kun, that is a really good question. And the answer is chakra memory, she said to the still perplexed genin. Rin entered lecture mode and explained, everyone knows that chakra is composed of both mental and physical energies. Many younger ninja are unaware that their chakra networks and the corresponding chakras retain both mental and physical characteristics. Looking at the amazed genin, she said, but if you use your chakra enough, it can remember a jutsu, allowing you to shorten the sign sequence, skip the pronunciations, or possibly both. The amount of chakra, or accuracy, required for the jutsu determines this. Depending on the distance, smaller jutsus, such as the Shunshin, can be completed in a few months without any signs or announcements. Depending on how much you use it or can use it, you may need to use larger jutsus, such as Nanami's Doryuheki, for years before you can begin cutting the sequences down. Compared to ninjutsu, genjutsu requires a lot more precision but less chakra. Before the genjutsu can be used without warning and still be effective, the chakra memory must be nearly perfect. It must also be perfect before you can use a single hand sign without making any announcements and have it function flawlessly. Kurenai was able to use it without making any announcements, but it was still not tip-top and required all of the hand signals. It's only been a year and a half since she started working on it. After all, one of the more difficult ways to shorten and hide a jutsu is to forego the verbal announcements. Why do we need the announcement if we have hand signs? Nanami asked, looking perplexed. Hand signs and announcements are the same thing. They are both mental and physical manifestations, she said to Rin. Invoking both aspects of your chakra to shape it into the jutsu you are thinking and expressing, you use your hands and brain to create the signs in your mouth and brain to speak the words. Both are initially required because the jutsu is primed by the hand sign action and discharged by the announcement action. As one gains experience, chakra memory takes over, requiring less physical expression and only mental effort. This means that jutsu can be primed with fewer hand signs and discharged by simply thinking the name. As previously stated, this type of stuff requires a great deal of experience. Hiroshi appeared as though a light bulb had suddenly struck in his head, which is why Nanami is able to use Iwagakure no Jutsu covertly. Because it doesn't require a lot of chakra and she uses it frequently? Rin gave the boy a nod before abruptly quirking her head. She uses it a lot? She asked curiously. Hiroshi nodded vigorously, yes. The day she finally mastered it, we had to watch her for 4 hours at a quarry as she popped into one rock and out of another before sensei caught her and pulled her back to practice itai. With a blush of embarrassment, Nanami slapped him in the back of the head and yelled, as if she had another question. What about the Yondaime's Rasengan and the Hyuga clan's Kaden? They announced them even though they didn't need seals. Rin was prepared to respond when the Jenin concluded, those techniques are all chakra control and chakra manipulation. They're just taking raw chakra and forming it into a jutsu. Since it's just chakra, they don't need seals to turn it into a fire jutsu or something like that, and I don't think they really need to announce them either. I think they announce it as a sort of pride or respect for it, considering it takes a lot of hard work for a pure chakra manipulation jutsu. And since it's already formed, there's no harm in shouting it out, I guess. Rin replied with a shrug. So now what, Rin? Sensei? Asked Nanami, as the Jenin appeared content with the response. She smirked crookedly and said, now, practice your taijutsu. While Hiroshi and Kurenai sagged, Nanami jolted. She had a firm grasp on their taijutsu after an hour and 3 bruised Jenin. Hiroshi and Kurenai received the average-looking award for being so fucking average, while Nanami's was surprisingly good for a rookie Jenin. As Rin fed Naruto beneath a tree, she thought, it was to be expected. One was an aspiring genjutsu mistress, and the other was a donkajutsu user. Their main concerns and strong points would not be taijutsu. Weapon users are instructed to never ever let go of their weapons because Hiroshi would only have to worry about taijutsu if the enemy took his weapons away from him. When in doubt, aim for the crotch, was the second important rule for anyone who used a weapon. She was still baffled as to why that was even a rule, much less the second one, the nandemo. Only in the event that her genjutsu failed would Kurenai have to worry about taijutsu, and even then, she would most likely back down rather than engage in hand combat. It should come as no surprise that Kurenai would fit into the category of genjutsu practitioners, who are typically lightweights on the field and not the most physically fit. The average taijutsu might be disregarded, but Rin had obvious issues with it. She could teach Kurenai 1 or 2 genjutsu and perhaps even help her with stealth, but she couldn't think of anything else to teach her. Maybe some jutsu for first aid? She was able to control it with her chakra. Rin could reform her taijutsu to complement the technique like Nanami's did because she was determined to learn the chakra scalpel and medic jutsu, making her the easiest to train. Overall, she had a wealth of medical knowledge and combat skills that she could impart to the girl. However, afterward, Hiroshi appeared. Rin didn't know what the hell donkajutsu, kenjutsu, or whatever it was. He was a baton twirler, a strategist, and a trap user. Rin was unable to offer guidance or instruction on any of them. It demonstrated how limited her knowledge and abilities were in reality. If she ever led a Jenin team, she would be a terrible Junin sensei. Outside of what used to be the fundamentals, she only possessed a few ninjutsu, a few genjutsu, specialized taijutsu, and enough of the others to reach Anbu and Junin. Rin appeared to view herself and her career choice in a less than admirable light. She was always told as a medic nin that you should focus on being a medic and let your teammates fight so you have chakra to heal them. Avoid, protect, and recover. It was your responsibility. Rin was rapidly coming to the conclusion that it must be the worst idea anyone could have come up with. Rin believed she had finally realized the flaw that the Sandaime had noticed decades earlier in Tsunade's proposal to place a dedicated medic nin on each 4-person cell. This flaw was that, although the medic nin might be able to heal teammates and defend themselves, it would reduce the attacking force to 3 or even 2. It results in a team member who is undertrained and becomes a weak link. As in the events of the day. Perhaps if she had been a medic nin first and a combatant second, Obito would not have died. She turned to face Nanami, who had just finished giving Hiroshi his ass. Not a medic nin, a multi-role field medic, she asked. Oh. With a smile on her face, she said, maybe the Jenin aren't the only ones who need training. Good work, guys. Now I have a good grasp of your skills. In the next few days, I'll be setting up your individual training. Until then, we'll work on general physical training, chakra control, and teamwork building. Can you all do tree climbing? Rin asked, drawing a nod from all the Jenin. In mild embarrassment to her own stomach, she grumbled, good. We're going to play treetop tag. Grumble, eheh. After we have lunch. The group then rose and set out to find a restaurant. 11 a.m. the following day, Rin was on her way to the Tower of Hokage. In order to gain access to the archives and locate a trainer, she needed to consult the Hokage. She left Naruto and the Jenin in Sume's care because, happily or unfortunately, she came over to visit. When she arrived at the tower, she told the receptionist that she wanted to see the Hokage. He was already in a meeting, but normally Anbu and Junins got right in. Rin gave a nod and took a seat to wait while thinking back on what she had discovered yesterday afternoon. They worked well together. Although they could improve their coordination and teamwork, it was surprising given that this was their first team exercise. Hiroshi wasn't overly enthusiastic when he boasted about being a strategist and trap user. The child was skilled at creating plans, laying traps to drive or capture an opponent, and using the terrain to the team's advantage. Since he had spent the majority of his early years with Nanami, he had no trouble involving Kurenai in his schemes. Rin had been on the verge of being caught a few times by Nanami's use of Iwagakure no Jutsu, and the girl's physical prowess was also nothing to laugh at. Despite lacking Nanami's physical prowess and Hiroshi's strategic acumen, Kurenai was shrewd, persistent, and resourceful. She employed her genjutsu, which Rin had recognized with ease just hours earlier, in ways that made them difficult to spot or, for that matter, avoid. One tactic was to cover herself with a genjutsu in a trap-filled area. Another was hiding ordinary clones beneath genjutsu and emerging from a nearby leaf branch. Rin's first few rounds were a little catchy, and she was only using half of her true abilities in the subsequent rounds, which were extremely close calls. Rin could undoubtedly state that she would prefer a team similar to Jenin if she were to play on one full time, but this revealed obvious issues with her own training. Instead of Jenin, half her skills should keep a group of Chunin on their toes. She considered her prior ideas about becoming a medic.nin and concluded that she and her 3 charges needed to improve their skills. Rin was startled out of her reverie by the secretary's words, Rin.san. The Hokage will see you now. Rin gave the secretary a nod before heading for the Hokage office, where she unintentionally ran into a Chunin who was easily a head taller than her. Ah, Gomen. I wasn't watching where I was going, miss. Rin gathered herself and said, Rin, Inazuka Rin. And you are? As she turned to face the recognizable-looking Chunin who had a cigarette in his mouth. Well, Rin.san. I guess you're here to see Pops, so I won't keep you. For now, the Chunin said with a sly smile before leaving through the secretary's office doors. Rin's expression was bewildered as she gazed at the doors. Did he just make a move on me? Rin asked herself. Since Obito, that hasn't happened. Rin got out of her daze and headed for the Hokage. Hiruzen and his son Asuma had just concluded a meeting. Well, it was more of the same arguments they have had since he turned into a Chunin than a meeting. Opinion differences, his shinobi role, and, more recently, the pain in the ass missions he was getting. In hindsight, he questioned, what the hell happened to the little kid that used to jump around asking for a new jutsu? He reschooled his features as he realized his next question of the day was coming up to his door. He was shocked to see Rin there when the door opened. What could have happened in the few days since he'd last seen her? Had she discovered his genius? As she sat in the chair across from his desk, he said, Rin-chan. I'm surprised to see you this quickly. Is there something wrong? Rin appeared uneasy. No and yes, Hokage. Sama. It seems like their emotional problems can be overcome given time, even if they are keeping me up at night right now, and they're a great help around the house. It's their training that has me worried. Anything I can help with? The Sandaime asked cautiously, raising an eyebrow. Well, I need someone to train Hiroshi. He uses batons as a weapon and is the strategist of the group. I could also use 4 pieces of chakra paper and access to the tower archives, she said. Why do you need access to the archives? And you said 4 pieces of chakra paper. Who's the other one for? Hiruzen asked, perplexed by the requests. The other piece is for me, so I can find some jutsus and techniques to learn. Rin scrawled on her cheek. With genuine interest in her explanation, the professor now asked, if I recall correctly, Rin, you're a medic.nin. Why would you need to learn ninjutsu? With a look that suggested recent revisions, Rin said, first, could you answer a question for me, Hokage? Sama? If I can, I'll try, the seasoned leader replied. During the Third Shinobi War, when Tsunade Sama proposed putting a medic.nin on every team. What was your reason for turning down the idea? Rin asked, seemingly taking a few moments to formulate her question, as if she already knew the answer. With a sigh, Sarutobi picked up his packed pipe and lit it, puffing it before responding. I have a feeling you already knew that, and plays a role in why you are here now. The Sandaime told the sheepish Junin. Tsunade was still emotionally devastated from her brother's death when she brought up that proposal, and would not listen to reason. Having a dedicated medic.nin on each team would bring the fighting force down to 3, against a full 4-man combat force, and could potentially lead to more fatalities than could be saved, had we implemented that proposal. Mana. I've found out how narrow my skills are when trying to train my charges. Hiroshi I can't help with any of his skills, and Kurenai I can only teach a few genjutsu and that's about it. Nanami is really the only one I can really give thorough instruction to, and that's because she wants to learn medical jutsu and pick up my chakra scalpel, and the taijutsu for it. She already plays the role of defense on the team and she figures she can be the team's multi-role field medic. I think she can do it. But it still leaves the other two. She answered with a hint of annoyance. Hiruzen smiled and summarized her explanation, saying, so you want someone to help teach the other two. And you want to train yourself to be more than just a medic.nin because your skills are limited and want to fill a bigger role. That pretty much sums it up, Hokage. Sama, she said, concurring with her leader's assessment. After giving it some thought, Hiruzen said, batons and strategy. With a sly smile that seemed to be hinting at something, he said, I might be able to help you Rin-chan. He might not be available all the time, but I'm sure you could scrounge up some other people to help you as well. He took 4 pieces of paper from his desk and said, you might want to try teaching other things that complement their specialties as well. After all, not all training is physical. You have chakra paper in your desk? What else do you have in there? Rin asked, looking disbelieving. It would boggle your mind. Anyways, I'll call ahead to the archive room and tell them that you're coming. Keep anything you copy safe. Good luck, the elderly Hokage said, his eyes widening as he slowly waved his hands in front of himself. Rin stood up to go. Thank you Hokage. Sama, it means a lot to me, she said with a bow before getting up and walking away. The Sandame's demeanor completely changed after she did, and he rubbed his hands together cunningly. Yes, I have the perfect gaki to help. Payback's a bitch Masuko. A cigarette. Smoking Chunin a few blocks away felt the need to argue with his father about something, but he was unsure of what. With a shrug, he left. November 15th, outside Rin's house, 6:30 p.m. Since Rin had just put Naruto to sleep in his room and gone back downstairs, Noboru had been waiting all day for her to be away from the target. Staying as silent as possible, he emerged from his hiding place across the street from the house and headed straight for it. He eventually made it through the yard and scaled the wall to the second story after becoming entangled in a few noxious weeds. Below, Rin was thinking about the date she had been pushed into as she prepared food. She occasionally thought she was naive or something. Before she noticed the baby bottle on the counter, she thought, oh well, it's not like it's a romantic meeting or anything. Shucks, I forgot to feed him. Kurenai-chan, could you go and feed Naruto quick? She yelled at the Jenin seated at the table, picking it up. He'll just wake up fussing in 10 minutes if he isn't and I can't leave the kitchen. Kurenai accepted the bottle, nodded, and walked over to Naruto's room. Upstairs, Rin put up a seal to keep villagers and the like out of Naruto's room, and Noboru eventually broke it. He slipped through the window and opened it quietly. He walked over to the crib and pulled out the photo. That's him okay, he believed. As he went to get the baby, a young girl with a baby bottle came in through the open door. She dropped the bottle to begin going through hand signals as her eyes widened at the sight of the unknown shinobi hovering over Naruto's crib. Noboru swiftly used his tanto and thrust for her heart after noticing that she was practicing hand signs for a jutsu. Kurenai instinctively put her hand in front of the approaching weapon and stopped the sequence instantly. Rather than passing through her heart, it went straight through her left hand and into her shoulder. She swiftly grabbed the tanto's hand by the wrist, keeping her opponent in place as she did the only thing she could think of in the circumstances, well into the effects of the adrenaline coursing through her. As hard as she could, she cocked her leg back and threw it between his legs. He could have stopped the simple attack if he hadn't been so focused on attempting to pull his arm away from the Jenin. His root training was helpful because he was currently clutching himself and attempting to will away the pain. Kurenai seized the chance to rush to the now crying baby, grabbed him by the good arm, and tried to run away. Noboru was obstructing her way and getting better fast. She needed assistance because she was stuck and couldn't perform jutsu without hands. With all of her strength and fear of the consequences, she made herself remember the gift of speech and yelled, Rin. Sensei. Just before a sandaled foot struck her face, sending her into the wall next to her while she clung to Naruto to shield him from the blow. Below, Rin was occupied with preparing dinner. While some Junin might have objected to being forced to cook in this circumstance, Rin saw cooking as rapidly developing into a pastime. Since feeding the Inuzukas was akin to giving imported water to a dehydrated Sunanin, she had never received many compliments on her cooking. Additionally, she hardly cooked for anyone else after moving out, if at all. Now, however, she had two Jenin sitting at the table, their mouths drooling and their eyes sparkling as they looked up at her as she made tempura chicken. As she was only 5 years older than the two, she couldn't help but wonder if this was what it was like to be a mother. Just before they could hear Naruto begin to cry and then a scream that made Rin's blood turn to ice. Rin. Sensei. Nanami interrupted her thoughts by looking up at the ceiling and saying, "Odd, it sounds like two people moving around upstairs." Rin ran up the stairs more quickly than anyone had anticipated, and this astonishingly doubled when she heard Naruto sob more and something heavy strike a wall upstairs. The room of Naruto. Noboru was furious. This bitch was holding the demon vessel like a vice after she had the audacity to kick him in the nuts. For good measure, he gave her a quick kick to the side of the head. Then, he wrenched her arm away, dislocated it, and picked up the Kyuubi child. The cognitive part of his brain was liquefied and leaking out of his open mouth and nose, and just before he turned to face the window, he noticed he didn't notice anything a bluish-white chakra. Covered hand palming the back of his head until he fell to the side, Rin catching Naruto before he fell. She was horrified as she glanced from Kurenai to the crying baby. Kurenai's eyes threatened to roll up into her head, and she was in complete disarray and hardly conscious. The other two Jenin had caught up, and Rin could hear it. She yelled, "Nanami!" at the startled Jenin, "Take Naruto and follow me to the hospital," as she pushed the crying baby into Nanami's embrace. In order to decide whether to treat Kurenai here or at the hospital, she examined her. Unfortunately, Rin was still low on chakra from training, and she had too many injuries. "You go to the Hokage and tell him what happened," she yelled at the still frozen Jenin as she picked up the blood-stained bridal style and turned to face Hiroshi. Hi, was his response as he abruptly stopped and walked out of the house. In order to reach the hospital more quickly, Rin and Nanami also invested as much of their chakra into the jutsu as they could. Nanami was 3 blocks behind Rin, who reappeared a block away. Even though Rin wanted to flee to the hospital immediately, she knew that if the kidnapper had a partner, she wouldn't stand a chance in hell because Nanami was carrying the reason for the intrusion in her arms. They both ran the remaining distance to the hospital after Nanami eventually caught up. "I need a room and a second medic. Nin immediately," she shouted to the nurse as she hurried through the hospital doors and headed for the reception desk. When the nurse saw the baby in the Jenin's arms, her astonishment turned into a hateful glare. "Get out! We don't want you, demon love," she said, but Rin grabbed her collar and pulled her an inch from her murderous face. "I said now," she yelled, using enough ki to make the nurse wet her pants. Rin threw her back into her chair behind the desk after she choked out, Room TH.322. She grabbed a bewildered medic. Nin and dragged him along as she charged into the room. Nanami hurried behind and closed the room's door. Take over, I need to clean up," the wet nurse said, turning to the other on-duty nurse who had witnessed the entire incident. The other could only give a stupid nod. With Hiroshi ran as quickly as he could in the direction of the Hokage tower after being shunned from the house. Ignoring the screaming secretary, he bursts through the double doors and rushes to the Hokage's office. "Hokage! Sama!" he yelled as he rushed through the doors of the office. The boy had interrupted a meeting between Danzo, the advisors, and the Hokage, and 3.5 sets of eyes turned to him. Hiruzen's irritation at the disruption soon gave way to worry. "You're one of Inuzuka Rin's charges, are you not?" he asked sternly. The panting Jenin grinned. "Yeah. Some strange Anbu-looking guy tried to kidnap Naruto. Rin Sensei killed him, but not before he seriously injured Kurenai. Rin Sensei told me to tell you while they went to the hospital. Hokage Sama," the Jenin said. After learning of the abduction attempt's failure, Hiruzen observed a slight tenseness in Danzo. "You still possess resources that ought to have been dissolved decades ago, Danzo?" Before he spoke again, he thought, "You better hope I don't catch you red-handed." "I see. It looks like this meeting will have to be finished another time." "Anbu," he said. Behind the shocked Jenin, 2 Anbu, Ox and Weasel, emerged. The Sandame commanded the two to recover the body from the house, and they bowed before vanishing to finish the job. Leaving 2 bewildered advisors shaking their heads and 1 Danzo fuming inwardly, Hiruzen jumped over his desk, picked up the Jenin under one arm, and shunshined all the way to the hospital. "One of my best men. Defeated." Byscandystryper and 3 brats. Before leaving the room, he yelled in his head. Medical facility. Where can I find a woman with brown hair and purple face markings? The Hokage asked the oddly attentive nurse as Hiruzen and his load materialized directly in front of the reception desk. Room 332 Hokage. Sama, the nurse said as she heard the description of the woman who swiftly killed her coworker. After responding, he nodded to the nurse, released Hiroshi, and proceeded to locate the room, with Hiroshi mumbling something while rubbing his elbows. He located the room and opened the door to see Rin and another medic. Nin removing a tanto from the hand and shoulder of a young Kurenai. The girl's head trauma and blood loss had caused her to lose consciousness. The Jenin was in such poor condition that Sarutobi couldn't help but wince. Seeing that stopping the treatment would not be a good idea, he located a seat next to a tired Nanami who was holding a wriggling baby Naruto, with Hiroshi occupying the seat opposite her. The audience flinched when Rin and the Shanghai medic moved Kurenai's shoulder, almost passed out or puked when they realigned her nose, and repaired her head and facial injuries. They also watched as Rin and the medic repaired Kurenai's hand and shoulder back together. When Rin finished and the other medic departed, an hour had gone by. Kurenai's head was wrapped in gauze, her bloody dress was thrown away, and her left side was covered in bandages. The purpose of the bandages was to prevent reopening by keeping the closed wounds safe and sterile until they strengthened. After snatching Naruto up a half hour earlier as Nanami fell asleep and sagged forward, the Hokage got up from his chair with him. He became worried that perhaps he was mistaken about his suspicions and, more significantly, that he was aware of Naruto after the Anbu he sent to retrieve the body informed him 20 minutes prior that it looked to be an Iwa shinobi. It took a while to clean up the man's liquefied brains all over the floor, the Anbu said in response to Hiruzen's question about why it took so long to recover the body. The Hokage asked the Kunoichi, "So, Rin-san, is she alright?" Rin appeared completely worn out, and her knees appeared to be about to give out. The events of today were a bit too much, even though she may have been training for the last 3 weeks and her chakra reserves have increased significantly. No permanent injuries, but she's going to be in pain for the next few days. Do you know who Hokage Sama? She asked the elderly leader after collapsing into a chair by her bed. In an attempt to learn more, he inquired, Anbu claimed to be an Iwa shinobi. Do you have any reason to think otherwise? Rin replied, he had a red headband. Only elite Junins and the Tsuchikage's personal guard wear that color, meaning he should have been able to put up more of a fight than he did. His clothes didn't match that standing either. Also, the plate was almost unscathed, probably taken off a dead Jenin. Lastly, the tanto. She took out the tanto soaked in Kurenai's. This is a fire country design. An Iwa shinobi wouldn't be caught. Well, dead using it. Whoever he was, he didn't fight the Third Shinobi War, I'll tell you that much. So, who would it be? She repeated, describing it as essentially a black, straight piece of metal with a leather grip wrapped around the steel handle. I have a suspicion, but without hard evidence, it would be impossible to connect him to it, and considering his stature within the village at the moment, I can't do anything against him, the elderly Hokage said impatiently. Hiruzen had to sigh, more out of relief than anything else. At least Iwa hasn't found out, he thought before responding. Does this suspicion at least have a name so I can prepare and avoid in the future? Rin asked, furrowed her brows. The Hokage gave a nod. He wasn't exactly one to defend the wrinkled old warhawk, after all. He said bluntly, I think you already know him. Shimura Danzo. Rin was present when he expressed interest in transforming Naruto into a living weapon, proving that she was aware of who he was. Her former sensei had also told her about his root program, which was slated to be discontinued years ago due to the cruel outcomes and more significantly the extremely unbalanced failure to success ratio of the group's mission list. Rin was therefore unable to express surprise that he would seek to obtain a Jinchuruki by any means necessary. Rin looked at the snoring Jenin leaning against each other in their seats and thought, I'll tell the Jenin to avoid the old mummy later. Kurenai's form began to awaken, interrupting their conversation. She looked at her sensei and cracked her puffy eyes, which had been black just 2 hours before. Rin was taken aback by Kurenai's subsequent action because she hadn't yet considered the previous incident. I.isn.nar. Ruto al. RRRR right? She said in a croaky, stuttering voice to the astonished Junin and grinning Hokage. He's fine thanks to you Kurenai-chan. If you hadn't protected him the way you did, he would have been gone, Rin said, smiling at the bandaged girl after getting over her surprise. Kurenai grinned and then saw the tanto that had been stuck in her shoulder, resting on a cart filled with soiled gauze and discarded medical equipment. She picked it up without thinking about it. Rin gave the Jenin a curious glance. I think I've earned it, Kurenai responded amusingly, managing to smirk despite the pain in her face. I think you've earned more than that, Rin shot back, laughing. The Hokage nodded in agreement. Yeah, you have, Kurenai. I never meant for you or your teammates to be so involved in Rin's mission, so I believe that you deserve some A-rank hazard pay for your courage, the Hokage said. Kurenai flushed, then her face became sullen. Rin questioned worriedly, what's wrong, Kurenai? Chan? Kurenai responded, depressed at her weakness. I was almost useless in that fight. I couldn't even see. Cast AG. Genjutsu before he attacked me. The only thing I could do was K. Kick him in the groin A. And SSSSSSC. Cream like A. ACC. Civilian, N. The Hokage placed his free hand on the young woman's arm. You have to remember, Kurenai, he was most likely a Jonin, and you are a Jenin. Also, if I remember correctly, you are aspiring to become a Genjutsu specialist. Most Genjutsu-based ninja are long-range fighters for exactly the situation you were in. You were almost powerless in the fight because it was close range, and tight quarters at that. The Hokage reassured her, and Rin joined in as properly. Being a Genjutsu specialist is a good goal, but even I've found that over-specializing can leave you blindsided, Kurenai. Chan. I have a few things I could teach you to shore up your mid-range problems, and Rin touched Kurenai's Tonto. Your new toy could be an excellent solution for close range. After that, Kurenai appeared to feel a little better. Her focus on Genjutsu had prevented Rin from teaching her much in the past. She occasionally felt envious that Kurenai was the odd one out while Nanami and Hiroshi were in sync with their respective teachers. Since it wasn't her area of expertise, Kurenai could now honestly state that if Rin could teach her something that would make her a stronger kunoichi, who was she to turn it down? As happy as a trauma patient could be, she smiled and said, Hi Rin. SS Sensei, to the Junin. Rin wanted to conclude by saying, well, I'm sure dinner is a little overcooked, since she was relieved that everything was going well again. The Hokage interrupted, causing Rin to perspire, saying, yes, the Anbu said whatever they put out in your kitchen smelled delicious. Sue, I guess we're gonna have to find alternate sustenance. Nanami. Hiroshi. Wake up already. She yelled at the two Jenin, who were still dozing off in the chairs. After yawning and stretching, they saw Kurenai sitting up in bed. They all yelled at once, Kurenai, you're awake, are you alright? Rin interrupted Kurenai as she was about to respond, saying, she's fine. Now let's go get something to eat before I resort to cannibalism. Hiroshi, go get a wheelchair for Kurenai. The startled boys snapped to attention and fled the room. The Hokage questioned, why not leave her here for monitoring? I'd rather not leave her cared to some of the people around this hospital. I'm a fully trained medic anyway, so I can do as much for her at home as can be done for her here, Rin said coolly after he watched her put on a frown. Well, I think I'll join you then, seeing as I haven't eaten since lunch. I would suggest a little ramen stand that your sensei frequented with his girlfriend, the old Hokage said, shifting the topic after concluding that it had something to do with Naruto. Rin heard something coming down the hallways just as she was about to respond. Squeak, 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 shuck. Rin's head bristles stood on end as she heard it approach the door, and then her eye twitched and a vein appeared on her forehead. Hiroshi. I swear to Kami if you think I'm gonna listen to that all the way home. Find another one. The squeaking stopped and then resumed, and then it quickly faded into the distance before crash. They heard a nurse shouting at what they assumed was Hiroshi, and then the Hokage and Nanami both started to perspire. Ramen it is, she said bluntly as she assisted Kurenai in her slightly tornized dress. After helping Kurenai into the wheelchair, Hiroshi returned a while later with a sheepish expression in a wheelchair that didn't squeak. All right, are you all set? The first two looked shocked, saying, holy shit, she can talk again. Hiroshi said the obvious in a less than tactful way after she received two hearty hi s and one stuttering one. Hi. Worry about it later. Food time is now, Rin said, waving the two Jenin away as she moved behind Kurenai's wheelchair. She made it clear that she was hungry, exhausted, and an Inuzuka by name. Konoha streets. The Hokage spent time with Naruto as the odd procession headed for the tiny ramen shack. The baby was laughing more loudly with each of the strange faces he was making at Naruto, some of which Rin didn't believe were humanly possible. You know Hokage. Sama, I don't see why you didn't just take him into the Sarutobi clan, thought Rin, with a sly smile. The Hokage appeared to be sorrowful before he spoke. I would have if it would have been beneficial to him. After my wife's death, there's been animosity between my sons and I. Put that with my duties and you have a clan compound with hardly anyone there at any given time. Then there's the problem with association. Why would the Hokage adopt a random orphan? Foreign powers would catch on, combined with the previous problem, and it would put him in even more danger than he is in right now. Iwa finding out would be a prime example, he said solemnly. Rin was only able to give a somewhat disheartening nod. The Hokage smiled at the Junin. Don't worry, Rin. If the assailant truly wasn't from Iwa, as you believe, then the secret is safe, and the mastermind has just lost a precious tool, as he would say. He didn't have many when he was ordered to disband his organization, and I'm sure his numbers haven't increased significantly since then, so I doubt a second attempt would be too soon in the making, he stated. Should you be discussing this in front? Rin asked the Jenin, looking up as she realized something. As they arrived at the flaps of the Ichiraku ramen stand, the seasoned leader reassured Rin, don't worry, they know. I've sworn them to secrecy about it before they even came to your house. They heard the words, welcome, coming from behind the counter, a tiny brown mop of hair. A brown-eyed young girl was grinning up at them as the group craned their necks. The Sandame said, hello little girl, is the owner of this place around? I'm not little. I'm already this many. The girl protested, displaying 4 fingers and a cute pout. Already 4. You are a big girl, so can you call the owner here? Sarutobi repeated, receiving a forceful nod from the child. Tou. San. Some old beardy face man with a funny hat wants food, the girl yelled as she turned away from them, prompting the Hokage to take the blame and the others to try to contain their laughter. Ayame. Chan, what did I say about being polite to the Kusto? Hokage. Sama. A man in the front was heard saying. He gasped upon seeing the beardy face man, and then bowed to the Sandame, saying, forgive my daughter for her rudeness, Hokage. Sama. Quite alright for a child and, sadly, quite accurate. So this is Ayame. How she's grown since the last time I've seen her, the Sandame said, waving it off after he had picked himself up. The Hokage looked at the child, who was hunched over and staring at her father as he bowed. Anyway, I'm sure you and your group are all hungry, so what can I get for you? Tucci asked the group after straightening up. Tucci returned to his cooking after receiving their orders, bringing his daughter along to keep her from causing any more trouble. It was left to the group to talk and drink. Rin and the Sandame were teasing Naruto and discussing the incident, while Nanami and Hiroshi were asking Kurenai a lot of questions. Oh, before I forget, I'll send Kurenai's payment tomorrow morning along with your weekly payment, Rin, the Hokage told the Junin as the conversation continued. The Junin nodded in agreement as she assisted Kurenai in getting her drink. When Hiroshi heard this, he became excited and asked, she's getting paid. So what do we get? With hope. By yelling at him, you get dinner baka. Nanami chose to dash his hopes. Her attempt failed. A hard bargain. Throw in some dessert. Later and it's a deal, Hiroshi said suggestively, wagging his eyebrows, making Nanami flush a new shade of red before tossing the ice water pitcher over Hiroshi's head. Without flinching, he assumed a contemplative pose. I can tell who Asuma has been teaching, the Hokage said, shaking his head. They're almost identical in their flirting, Rin said, laughing. Couldn't be more true, Hokage. Sama. When he's not flirting, he's trying to con me into going on a date, I promise. OFFF. I located you. As his head exploded through the tent flaps, Asuma interrupted her, saying, thought you could get out of a night of drinking. He paused, and his triumphant grin vanished when he saw his father and a heavily bandaged Kurni. He let out a loud sigh before continuing, what happened? Rin told him the story while their food was being served and Asuma placed his order, assuming he would be there for a while. He asked simply. Honestly, Pops, why do you even keep that gimp of a mummy around? Asuma asked his old man after Rin was done, looking slightly disgusted and much more irate. He seems to only contradict everything you do, and when that doesn't work, he tries to stab you in the back. As much as I'd love to do that. Hey. I don't have the evidence or the support, he said bluntly, just take him out behind a shed and slap an uploading tag on his back. His father was picturing doing just that, and he laughed darkly, but shook his head. In the meantime, as they say, Hiruzen declared, keep your enemies close and your friends close. There's also the proverb, kill the snake before it bites you, Asuma said, shaking his head. And this one's for your ass, Pops, Asuma shot back, gesturing to the aforementioned posterior. You think a half-bandaged mummy is going to get the best of me? harumphed Hiruzen. The argument was fueled by the Sandame's retort. You're 1,000 years too early to be lecturing me boy. Naruto continued to obstinately argue with the funny men for 5 more minutes until Asuma's food arrived, at which point the Chunin sat down to eat. Asuma had never been here before, so he was as delighted by the ramen's flavor as the Jenin had been. Damn, this beats free birthday bar drinks any day. Then he remembered, why? Why is there a naked picture of me on this cake? He finished his meal quickly, took out a cheap ceiling scroll, and unrolled it across an empty section of the counter. I didn't have enough money for a present, but I at least had enough for a cake, he said with a nervous smile, after he had looked at the cake. Everyone else was too busy staring at the cake with a mixture of blushes, bloody noses, drool, and a look of pure shock and horror on Rin's face. She yelled angrily. Asuma nervously scratched his cheek and said, yeah, referring to the expertly crafted, icing. Scribed image of her nude body on the cake, obscenely straddling the cradle in the center. An erotic cake shop in the Yamanaka district was the only bakery open at this hour. Back in my Jenin days, I kind of played a practical joke on the owner. It appears that she has me back, in a cold sweat, he laughed. A birthday cake with a picture of Rin in her birthday suit was kind of poetic in her exhausted state of mind. She sighed and accepted the awkward situation, saying, just light the fucking candle so we can get it over with, and Asuma exhaled in relief before grinning. That's the spirit. He lit the candle and exclaimed. Now that she looked at it more closely, it looked a lot like a penis. Before she could object, Asuma began to sing, and everyone else joined in, including the highly amused looking Hokage and even Tucci, who discovered he liked this group of customers. Rin was a tomato red by the end of the song, and it didn't help that the peach colored wax from the penis candle that dripped down appeared to have turned to plain white. Everyone cheered as she blew out the candle, thinking, I wish this day would end. Asuma removed the candle and asked, want to lick the frosting off? Rin swatted it out of his hand, revealing a bulging vein on her forehead. No, I don't want to lick the damn frosting off, he asked, laughing. The candle flew out of the ramen stand as she growled. What on earth is this? A male voice said from the other side of the curtains. It kind of looks like a penis candle. A very familiar female voice called back, making Rin go pale. The curtains fanned out as 2 people emerged, both carrying babies. Inuzuka Sume with a wriggling Kiba and Yamanaka Inoichi with a wrapped bundle in the shape of his 2.5-month-old daughter, Ino. Oh, nay. Chan, here you are. Where were you, I wondered. She eyed the cake and drew lead. I'm having a birthday party. I see. Is that appropriate for a celebration with such people? She asked. Rin turned to Asuma with shaded eyes, and he spoke up, saying, Yuna's shop? Yamanaka erotic cake shop, only place open, owner pulled a prank on me. Inoichi asked, trying not to let his blood get in his head. How in the world did you annoy her? Asuma scratched his head and shrugged. I can't even remember anymore. I think it had something to do with laxative, in response to Inoichi's question. Inoichi, why are you out at this hour of the night? The Hokage continued, normally you're at home now, unless. To which Inoichi replied, well, Izumi is having one of her off days and pretty much told me to find my own dinner, he said sheepishly. He neglected to mention that he had returned home to find his wife, who was furious, ignoring Ino's cries and practically spying on him as soon as he opened the door. By the time everything had calmed down, Ino was still crying and Izumi had locked herself in the bedroom. He saw what Ino needed and concluded that both of them should give his wife some time to calm down. I have to give you your birthday present after all, Sume said with a smile, after I found the bum wandering the streets while I was looking for Rin, and decided to go look for you together, the 3 of us being parents and all. Ah, I see. Wait. I'm not a parent. Rin nodded as she argued with Sume during the argument. You have 4 kids and you're not a parent? That's funny, nay, Chan. You're lucky too, you did it without stretch marks. Sume said, mockingly surprised, pointing to Naruto and the Jenin. Rin's eye moved as the Hokage pretended to snicker at Sume's comment. She turned to face the Jenin and said, I'm not their mother, isn't that right guys? Before focusing on the 2 Jenin that were acting like they were crying. Nanami continued where Hiroshi had left off, sobbing, we've worked so hard just to gain your approval and love. Chan. How could say such a thing? Hiroshi cried. Kurenai even chimed in, pouting as she attempted to reach for her drink with her previously dislocated shoulder, saying, Chan, I can't reach m.my drink. As her wish began to seem more like a pipe dream, Rin sagged in defeat. "It's alright, Chan. Let's have some sexy cake and forget all about this terrible day," Sume said, and she got a round of applause. Asuma had begun chopping the cake when Sume turned to face her. "Yo, I got dibs on the left breast," she exclaimed. Rin wasn't really listening at this point because she was already foaming at the mouth. As messed up as it was, the next few hours were spent eating Rin cake, meeting the babies, restoring Rin's sanity, and generally having a pleasant little celebration. At last, everyone left, and Rin dragged her ass home while carrying the Jenin. She dragged Naruto's crib into her room until she could configure the security seals, cleaned up the mess in the kitchen, and then turned to the reassembled Jenin after concealing the seemingly crotchless breastless unmentionables that Sume had given her as a gift. With a deathly expression, she deadpanned, "We're taking a day off tomorrow. And this night will never be spoken of." They all nodded their heads enthusiastically and went to bed without the Jenin having to ask why. Rin found it wasn't as horrible as she had imagined it to be as she lay in bed and reflected on the day. Naruto was safe, her last Jenin's mental issues were beginning to subside, and she could finally say that she wasn't as alone as she had believed more than a month earlier. In fact, she might grow accustomed to this. But hopefully, birthdays, bandages, and burnt chicken will be a thing of the past. 10 a.m. on December 21st, Training Ground 6. Rin fed Naruto while keeping a close eye on the Jenin as they practiced on the training field. Rin would watch with pride as they performed each move. Nanami's hands were glowing bluish-white as she went through her katas. Rin is extremely pleased with Nanami's development. She was as skilled with the chakra scalpel as a medic.nin 2 years her senior. Rin thought Nanami was prepared to test it in the field. Although her medical abilities were not particularly remarkable, they were unquestionably superior to some of the hospital's physicians and would still be a significant advantage in combat. Her chakra control advanced quickly, and her chakra reserves not only tripled but also quintupled. Interestingly, Hiroshi's control and reserves increased simultaneously. They were clearly seeing results from whatever they were doing for training. They both turned beet red and stammered as their noses leaked blood, just before they passed out, after she had asked them what their secret was so she could perform it with Kurenai. It must have been extremely taxing, whatever the hell it was. Going on to Hiroshi, Rin can honestly state that Asuma's training impressed her. Given its homunculus roots, Hiroshi's Dankajutsu style was in good shape. His ability to think strategically was improving with each training session, and he was practically an expert at setting traps. Rin became less envious of Asuma after she discovered a lesson for him. The past, November 22nd. It occurred after the Hokage and Asuma failed to find any information pertaining to Hiroshi's affinity for Raiden. The Hokage was apparently so shocked that he gave each ninja a bonus if they returned with or discovered any pertinent information about Raiden. However, it left them short. Rin had an idea at that point. A seal of conversion. Using a conversion seal, a chakra from the base 5 elements would become an elemental chakra. Since most people used them for an affinity they didn't have, which consumed chakra like an Akamichi ate food, they were typically negative. However, the seal would consume chakra more like a Hyuga in Hiroshi's case, where it would be transforming it into his innate affinity. Naturally, this seal would only electrify his batons. It would not use jutsu or weapon-based attacks, but it would still be a bitch if it struck you. Rin committed to the idea and spent the next few days searching through Fuinjutsu scrolls for the seal needed for the job. Many people believe that seals can perform any task you ask of them, including cleaning your home and casting jutsu of sub-elements you didn't have. Actually, if it weren't for one significant issue, they would be correct: time. Seals are simple programs that perform basic commands like possess, store, suppress, and seal using a complex array of simple kanji that have been transformed into much more complex algorithms. For mass production items like exploding tags, the process could only be sped up by the fluid movement of an experienced seal master because the arrays for the various types of seals were big and time-consuming to write. However, this was only by a small amount. That's why explosive tags used to be so damned expensive until they built a huge stamp room. That can be achieved by working on each tag for 20 minutes. Possession seals took even longer to complete than suppression seals. Some would contend that more intricate seals, such as the Shiki Fuin and summoning seals, were available. Summoning seals were automatically cast using a jutsu technique and connected to the summoning scroll via your blood signature. Since the death god scribed the Shiki Fuin, there was no room for debate. No, the seals that could animate sparing dummies were the most sophisticated Rin had yet seen. They were as complex as an insect's brain and took weeks to make. It would likely cost more to buy a new home, But yes, you could create a seal to clean yours. As it was, Rin had located the seal she was seeking. In addition to some of the longest and tightest lines of code she has attempted in her life, it would require 34 man-hours per person. She let out a sigh at the amount of work required, but she knew that if she didn't assist all of her charges in some way, it would haunt her forever. She picked up the scroll and proceeded to retrieve the materials she would require to perform the seals. When she got home, she went to fetch Hiroshi, who was in the backyard fighting weeds. In any case, where did those things originate? 44th training ground? I thought, she said. She called out to the Jenin, Hiroshi, so as not to join the battle with the ferocious weeds. God knows what might happen to her. After all, this was Jiraiya's home. What's up, Ka-chan? He asked, causing her eye to twitch, after literally freeing himself and running over to Rin. On the training fields, she was known as Ka-sensei, because everyone had been calling her that since her birthday. She dismissed her annoyance and turned back to face Hiroshi. I require your batons, she said plainly. Before releasing them from his hidden pockets, Hiroshi blinked a few times. Okay. For what though? He inquired inquisitively. Rin showed him the seal instruction scroll that she had taken out. I'm going to spend the next few days making these. After they're done, you'll be able to channel chakra into them and they will convert your chakra into lightning chakra, thus electrifying your batons. She told Hiroshi with wide eyes. Confused, he said, you can do that with seals? Regarding the intimidating task, Rin nodded and said, yeah, you can do a lot with seals, though it gets time-consuming the more complicated they are. These conversion seals will take up to 34 hours each to make. Then she heard 3 unexpected words. Can I help? Rin asked incredulously, you want to help me with something that will take a whole 3 days to complete? As if a pair of antennae had just appeared on Hiroshi's head. Yeah, maybe I can learn about seals too. Some might even be great for trap making, exclaimed Hiroshi, his excitement faltering only slightly. I never thought. I mean, I don't even like fuinjutsu. So how could I possibly have, Rin said, nearly tripping. Foolish. Before turning to face Hiroshi, she mentally chastised herself. All right, but you're going to learn what I teach you, she said sternly. It was going to be a bitch to try to teach it because she still didn't like seals. In response, Hiroshi exclaimed, Hi Ka-sensei. With eagerness. Rin simply shook her head before guiding him to the space she had prepared for the procedure. End of flashback. 3 weeks have passed since then. Although he didn't become a prodigy seal master, he put a lot of effort into learning ones that would be useful to his abilities. Explosive seals, proximity seals, suppression seals, restraining seals, explo. Foom. Ding seals. Kurenai screamed, choking on the smoke from the miniature explosive node trap. Cough. Cough. Damn it, Hiroshi. Kurenai pulled her tanto and came back at Hiroshi with full force, leaving him to fend for himself while he was laughing uncontrollably. Kurenai's mental development had kept pace with her physical development. As Shiri acquainted her brain with the art of verbal communication, his stutter gradually decreased. Her ability to finally articulate what transpired the night of the Kyuubi attack, however, was her greatest accomplishment. Rewind. The House of Rin, November 20th. The bed was empty when Rin woke up in the middle of the night. She stood up and searched the house, but found nothing. Before realizing she hadn't checked Naruto's room, she went back upstairs. At this hour of the night, what could she be doing inside? As she walked to the door, Rin thought. When she softly opened it, she discovered Naruto sleeping in her arms and Kurenai leaning against the wall. If not for the girl's dejected, aloof expression, which seemed to be a reliving of a negative memory, it would almost be adorable. As far as Kurenai could tell, Rin approached her without her knowledge and sat down directly beside her. Rin yelled her name, Kurenai-chan, startling her out of her reverie. She said, sorry, Ka-chan, he needed a diaper change. Is that why you were sitting against the wall looking like you're mourning a grave? Rin asked, raising her eyebrows. Sort of, there wasn't anything. G to put into a real grave, Kurenai muttered sadly, trying to contain her tears as Rin's question seemed to completely sap her energy. Rin quickly realized what she was discussing and remained silent so as not to press the girl to tell her. A few minutes later, Kurenai spoke up once more. My Team and IIW were one of the best reconnaissance teams ever produced, so SSS soon out of the academy. Kento was great at tracking with HHIS Ninja. Ryuta was a natural. L with his Byakugan, yet S. Somehow he was always LLLLL leading us into the thick of things, but Tomo. Sens. S.Say would AAA always pull us B. Back out in one piece. Sensei K. Kept us out of the XAMS for a year to hone our skills, YYY yet we S. Still lost in the third stage. Tomo. Sensei J. Just cheered us up, S.Say. Saying we WW would get it. T next time. We T. Trained ourselves even harder, W. Waiting for fall for the exams to come to Konoha again, but, but, as she began to cry. Rin placed a hand on her shoulder and asked the teenager, who was about to start crying, what happened Kurenai-chan? W. We were .re in charg.ge of HH helping find Wo-1. D.dead for O.1 of the medical units. W. We were trailin.ng it. T's path, looking F. For survivors and W. We were GE. Getting too close. I stopped to cast a concealment G. Genjutsu. T. Tomo. Sensei turned around. D and told me it wouldn't work, B. But they didn't N. Notice the K Kyuubi turn around and L. Lunge at them with its mouth open. The next thing I remember was a wall of teeth in front of me. I could H. Hear Kenta and Ryuta SSS screaming in agony F. From behind them. TH. The next instant it RR raised its head and it W. Was gone. IR. Remember looking .ng down and seeing too. Tomo. Sensei staring up at me. B. But it was J. Just HHHHER. Kurenai began to cry. Rin pulled the girls into an embrace, doing the only thing that came to mind. Kurenai sobbed for a good hour before dozing off. Before returning to her own bed, Rin carried her back to the room and wished the girl a speedy recovery. As much as Kurenai could be, she appeared happier the following day. Rin, however, was aware that the team's emotional healing was almost finished. End of flashback. Kurenai's physical development was also not to be laughed at. As her voice returned, her genjutsu's full effectiveness also returned. With her new Megan, Jubaku Satsu, demonic illusion, tree binding death, Rin had to acknowledge that it was getting harder for her to find and eliminate them. Both Rin's and Kurenai's proficiency with their blood, earned Tondo was improving. Once you learned the fundamentals, it was a very simple weapon with a very simple style. The first is that it isn't the best weapon for stabbing because of how close you and your opponent would be if the strike didn't kill your opponent. Rin had to thank Danzo and his men for screwing up, and seriously wonder who the hell was teaching them. It was a slashing and blocking weapon that was perfect for unarmored targets in close quarters. Kurenai could therefore draw the Tonto and defend herself until she killed the opponent or until she was able to get a suitable distance away from the opponent if genjutsu was not an option. Then came the fire jutsus that Rin had taught her about. They were a bit more difficult. The best way to execute the jutsu was to have a firm understanding of your Kaiden affinity. They absorb more chakra if you don't, as Rin discovered with Kaiden, Karyu Enden. It only created one, extremely sluggish, moving dragon and put Kurenai on the verge of a coma. Even she was aware that the Kaiden exercises and the chakra reserve building exercises Rin was showing her would be gradual and yield minimal results in the short term. Unless she was hungry, in pain, having a bad period, frustrated, or horny, Rin was not an impatient woman. It seems that she discovered a new one in the ninjutsu art. Now she wanted results, which prompted Rin to take extreme measures. Rewind. Outskirts of Konoha, December 7th. Rin approached the home of a longtime friend who grew herbs for Konoha's many herbal cures. Additionally, she grew things that the Konoha shinobi community did not approve of. Rin knocked on the front door twice after waiting for a while. The door opened as she heard someone approaching. A woman in her mid-40s, with long hair and odd orange eyes that were not obscured by the tiny round sunglasses hanging from the tip of her nose, greeted her. Rin was studied for a few moments before the woman remembered. Rin. Kami kid, I haven't seen you in over a year. I was starting to think you died of an overdose. She smiled knowingly. Rin grimaced and said solemnly, Hey Hotaru. Almost, but I cleaned up. As the Junin pushed up her sunglasses, Hotaru tisked, Shame on ya. Kid, I knew that stuff would nip you in the ass. Good to know you're not dead though. So what does a clean girl like you want with an old social deviant like myself? The words, I need some akure peppers, came from Rin as she approached. Hey, I got out of that business. After all, the Konoha Council looks down on performance enhancing. Hotaru said, raising her hands in front of her. Follow me, Rin said, flashing a 1000 Ryu note in front of Hotaru, who abruptly interrupted her speech and grabbed it. They went into the basement of her house. Her basement appeared to be a lab. The walls were lined with hydroponics, and hanging planters held items Rin knew would land her in jail or a hefty fine. Rin, however, knew that would never happen. Hotaru had a lot of connections, and some very powerful people were among her clients. Then Rin discovered a plant that she knew too well. Its captivating blue phosphorescent glow belied its function as a highly pernicious hallucinogen. Yes, she was all too familiar with that one. Aha, here they are. I have 5 ripe ones too. I'll cut ya a break, 1000 Ryu each, she said, putting herself in business mode, as she turned back to Hotaru, who was mumbling to herself as she looked through the plants growing in the hydroponics along a wall before straightening back up. As Hotaru began selecting them, Rin nodded and produced her wad of cash. I'll take all 5, she said. Hotaru asked, so, what are we making them into if I might ask? Akure peppers could be used for a variety of purposes and prepared in a few different ways. Rin chose the phrase, Amaterasu pills, to tell her. As she packed up the peppers, Hotaru snorted and asked in a humorous manner, who has their Kaden undies in a bundle? Rin sighed. One of my students is a genjutsu specialist, and since she'll never seriously train in ninjutsu, I figured I would give her the shortcut to her affinity so she can do the jutsus I teach her to round her out a bit. How strong are these by the way? Rin asked as he handed over the cash. The ones they grow at the Northern Fire Temple are half the strength of mine. 4 pills at a time maximum or she'll light up like a human torch, Hotaru said with a sly smile as the product and cash were exchanged. Thanks for the advice. It's nice to know you care, Rin said, nodding as she put the package in her pouch. No, the advice was for the tip you added to the price, said Hotaru, shaking her head. I don't. I've seen too many people die and ruin their lives on stuff that I sell 'em, and honestly, the guilt dried up a decade ago. Hell, I knew I was selling ya too much, but who am I to complain as long as I get paid? She said, waving the extra 500 Ryu note around. Well, I guess I should get going. Thanks, Rin said with a slight grimace as she ascended the stairs. Before turning around and moving farther into the basement, Hotaru called out to her, anytime kid. Hope we do business again. Rin went home to do some chemistry after obtaining the necessary ingredient. The following day, Rin instructed the Jenin to warm up on the training field. Rin and Asuma watched the Jenin go through their paces on the field's edge a few minutes later. Rin was startled when Asuma said, what might those be Rin-chan? After she had been fumbling with a tiny glass jar filled with red pills. She lied while laughing, just some diet pills. You know, gotta keep my figure. I don't think Amaterasu pills are a good dietary supplement, unless you're looking to literally burn the pounds off, Asuma said casually as he lit up another cigarette. How the hell did you know what it was? Rin asked suspiciously, squinting her eyes at Asuma. Rin choked and then slumped in defeat as Asuma grinned and said, I didn't. I just guessed, she muttered, you don't even act surprised I knew where to get them. Asuma raised an eyebrow. You don't remember .tsk. Of course you wouldn't remember. I was the one who had to help the Yondaime carry you to the hospital during your little episode, because you were thrashing around so hard. I swear you must be the only person in the world who has managed to break the yellow flash's nose, he said with a chuckle. Rin looked utterly appalled and ashamed. I broke his nose, she said, getting Asuma to nod. Asuma asked in a genuinely bewildered tone, what was the crap that almost did you in anyways? I've never seen a reaction like that. The calm had returned to Rin, and she muttered, Tsukiyomi. Damn, you went right for the hardcore stuff didn't you? Judging by the timeline, I'm guessing the Third Shinobi War was your reason. He said. Rin laughed without humor. Although Asuma may appear to be a lazy, ill-dressed jerk, you either knew better or were astounded by his witty repartee. Yeah, my teammate's death actually. Kakashi was never any emotional support, and Minato Sensei became Hokage soon after the war. The only thing I really had was missions. I probably would have burnt myself out or something with how recklessly I accepted them, but I took a quick C rank one day instead of the A rank I was going to. The C rank had me delivering some herbal seeds from Waterfall Country to a house on the outskirts of Konoha. Asuma interrupted her story and asked, Hotaru, Rin signaled that she wanted an explanation by putting her hands on Asuma's hips and narrowing her eyes at her. Someone, I know, may or may not, put something a little stronger into his pipe when the stress gets bad, and he sends me to get it. He murmured. Knowing full well that she only knew one person who smoked a pipe and was under a lot of stress, Rin simply burst out laughing. But she couldn't blame the man because this was his second run. Asuma nodded as she concluded, anyway, I found out about it, she sold it to me, and things felt better. Well, until, you know. So why are you going to push another kind of drug on one of your students? Asked Asuma. She sighed, please, Tsukiyomi and Amaterasu are totally different things. The only reason Amaterasu is restricted is for two reasons. 1. The stuck-up Uchiha and their prideful boasts of being the best fire users. 2. The Hokages saw it as a liability should fire users grow too dependent on it to attain their affinities. Amaterasu isn't addictive, has no bad side effects, that I know of, and has a variety of uses from fire affinity enhancement to male enlargement, if prepared in different ways, she made up out of a commercial. Oh, so you're trying to make her penis bigger? Asuma nodded. As they concluded their exercises, she interrupted him, shut up. And then walked over to the Jenin. Good work guys. Alright, Kurenai-chan, you're going to be working on those jutsus you learned. Kurenai tried to leave, but she paled and said, but Sensei, I nearly died the last time I tried them. Rin was not having any of it. This time, will be different, she cried, grinning triumphantly, and thrust the glass pill bottle into Kurenai's hand. Sensei, W. What are these? Pills. W. What kind of pills? With her hands flaring at the word, better, she yelled, pills that will make your fire jutsus better. Rin's smile never wavered, causing discomfort to all three Jenin. Rin, still grinning, cautioned, don't take more than 4 of Tama, in fact, only take 3. With fatigue, Kurenai questioned, are they dangerous? Rin said, that's a good question Kurenai-chan. Before gathering the other two Jenin under her arms and making her way back to Asuma, who was observing the scene with a weary expression. Just take 3, chew them up 5 or 6 times, swallow, and then do Karyu Enden. Rin shouted to Kurenai after dropping the Jenin off. 3 pills fell into Kurenai's open hand as she reluctantly opened the bottle. Curiously, the pills appeared to be radiating heat onto Kurenai's palm and glowing like embers. She asked anxiously, are you sure these are safe, Sensei? That's a good question Kurenai-chan. Yet you haven't answered. Trust me, you say that from over there. No pain, no gain. That's my line. Just eat the fucking pills. Kurenai responded with a shout of, fine. Before putting the pills in her mouth, chewing them, and then swallowing them. The effects were immediate. She broke out in a cold sweat as the searing pain spread up her throat and into her mouth, nose, and even her eyes. Then she had the impression that molten lava was flowing through her entire chakra network. Kurenai, do Karyu Enden, Rin yelled fast. Kurenai's face turned fire engine red, and she began rapidly going through hand signs. Kaden. Karyu Enden. Fire release. Fire dragon flame bullet, she exclaimed as her fingers touched Tiger and she inhaled before passing out. 6 fiery dragons emerged from her technique, and everyone on the sidelines couldn't take their eyes off of it. They performed a lovely dance in which they snaked and swirled around one another before finding support in a forest across the training field. Like dried kindling, the forest began to spread. Asuma made the decision to speak up, telling a pale Rin, that would have been really impressive if we didn't all have to run right afterward. Training's done, back to the house. She shouted back to the Genins, who also ran off, after nodding and picking up Naruto. She then ran out to the field and threw Kurenai over her shoulder. Are you sure we should leave it like this? Asuma asked, running beside her as he caught up to her. You're right, scapegoat no jutsu, she yelled, tripping Asuma with her foot out. I don't fucking think so. Get back here Rin, Asuma yelled as he ran back at her full charge after tumbling and getting passed by the other two Genins. 5 minutes later, the fire department would arrive. Investigations into the incident were still ongoing. Flashback concludes. Kurenai found the Amaterasu pills to be a bit too effective. Her affinity for fire was stronger, really stronger, but Rin couldn't tell if that was because of the pills or some hidden quality in her. Nidime is strong, but completely the opposite. Kurenai could effortlessly perform high-level fire jutsus, while the Nidime could perform enormous water jutsus even in the absence of a nearby water source. No pun intended. Kurenai was able to execute a Karyu Enden with 8 dragons once the bottle of pills had been consumed. Uchiha hasn't even accomplished that many. It is surprising to see that Kurenai's eyes reflect the fact that Rin estimated that much more than half of Kurenai's reserves were now purely fire elemental chakra. As you looked into them, they appeared to be smoldering like a hot red ember rather than just being red. Since it appeared that ocular genjutsu no longer worked on her, this alone appeared to be somewhat beneficial. Every time Rin attempted a genjutsu on Kurenai that affected her sense of sight during training, it either immediately disrupted or, in certain cases, reflected back at the caster. Rin wasn't sure if this was due to accumulated elemental chakra in Kurenai's eyes or some forgotten Kekkei Genkei that had been awakened. Rin could only see Kurenai's skill as a genjutsu expert as a strength, but it also appeared that the girl had shown some interest in her elemental affinity. At the moment, she was working on a project that would combine them with genjutsu. Overall, Rin was able to maintain her feelings for the Jenin. They had advanced to the point where they were unquestionably headed for Chunin. It was time to pass them on to another Junin so they could begin their missions. She only signed up to help them heal and become stronger, even though she would miss them and their assistance around the house. With a resigned nod, she removed Naruto from the nipple he had grabbed while Rin was away in La La Land, placed him in his basket, and crossed the field, indicating that the three of them should cease attempting to murder one Anathera or training, as Rin couldn't be certain. In any case, she had no problem teaching them to work as a team. Rin raised her voice as they gathered around her in their various states of fatigue. Good work, guys. Your physical and emotional recovery is complete. I am confident that with your skills and strength, you can easily take on and complete any mission that is thrown at you, unless it's a very misinformed mission with high-ranking missing nins, then I'm sure you'll be killed viciously or even tortured mercilessly without the sweet release of Dia. Sensei. The three Jenin interrupted her simultaneously. Well, sorry. Anyways, it's time for you guys to get your butts back onto the active duty roster. And to do that, we need to find out who your Jonin sensei is going to be, she said to the Jenin, as Rin knocked on her head and she stuck her tongue out sheepishly. I thought you were our Jonin sensei Chan, Nanami said, as the Jenin appeared perplexed. Rin nodded. I was only to help you recover through your ordeals. I can't be your Junin sensei since I already have a mission to protect and raise Naruto, she said. The Jenin appeared depressed. She concluded by waving for the Jenin to follow her as she returned to the tree to pick up Naruto. Don't look so glum, guys. I'm sure your Junin sensei will be better at leading you than I ever could, and probably better rounded to teach you more as well. Besides, you'll see Asuma and me around the village. So, let's not keep the Hokage waiting. Hokage Tower. 20 minutes later. Rin sat in the reception area with the Jenin. The Inuzuka dogs were escaping and urinating in the Uchiha district while the Hokage was occupied with resolving a conflict between the heads of the Inuzuka and Uchiha clans. The sound of the argument could be heard even in the reception area. The argument that was taking place made Rin and the Jenin laugh uncontrollably. Well, at least they're not shitting on your front porch. They did shit on my front porch. Really? Who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Why you? 10 more minutes passed before the Hokage made the decision to intervene and put an end to the situation. After a few more minutes, a furious-looking Fugaku stormed down the stairs and through the reception doors. When Sum noticed Rin and her Jenin sitting in the reception area, she became a little irritated and asked inquisitively, Chan, what are you doing here? She laughed. Besides listening about the dogs trying to fertilize the Uchiha district, I'm here to finish my job and hand off the Jenin to their Junin sensei, she responded. Sum appeared sheepish, but she immediately brightened when she heard the final justification. She tried to maintain a straight face as she said, Oh, I'll accompany you then. I'd like to know who they get for a sensei. After receiving the all clear, Rin simply shrugged, got up, and walked to the office, with Sum and Jenin trailing behind. She opened the doors and saw the Hokage packing his pipe, complaining. When he looked up, he saw Rin entering with her group. He hid the pipe quickly. Rin.san, what brings you here today? And what made you accompany her Sum.san? He inquired. I would like to inform you that the Jenin are emotionally recovered and physically fit to take missions again, Hokage. Sama, Rin said, placing Naruto's basket in the chair. Ah yes, that's good to hear, I'm sure they're Junin. Sensei is happy to hear that as well, the Hokage replied, recalling instantly. Rin became excited and said, so they're Junin. Sensei has already been decided, to which the Hokage nodded and said, oh yes, in fact, she signed on for them almost 2 months ago. Sume appeared to be about to explode, and even the genin were beginning to understand. Rin responded with raised eyebrows. Wow, she must have been pretty eager to get them if she signed up for them that long ago. Oh, she was, the Hokage said with a smile as he produced several pieces of paper. He slid the forms across the table and said, she didn't even read the forms before she signed them. Rin looked at the papers, the ones she knew, and began to feel gloomy. Key sentences that were deciphered from the bureaucratic jargon that comprised the majority of the documents gave Rin a negative impression, primarily because it was her signature in her handwriting on the documents. To put it simply, it said, on October 25th, 4x, I, Inuzuka Rin, grant the Jenin students Hiroshi, Nanami, and Yuhi Kurenai the title of Junin Sensei, along with all the duties and obligations that go along with it. As the Junin Sensei for the parties mentioned above, I promise to train and mentor them to the best of my abilities until one or more of the following requirements have been satisfied. It was the same Jenin team application form that Minato Sensei had to sign in order to be accepted as a team, and the same one that she had been duped into signing 2 months prior. No, she wasn't duped. She signed it enthusiastically, but when Rin became enraged, she wasn't very interested in the details. Now, Rin wasn't an aggressive woman. Flying son of a fucking bitch, fucking Kami damn. Gurk. Yahahahahaha. UTSUME, did you fucking knew? Why did you not tell me why the cock-sucking fuck? Gloglurkolog. She was as predictable as any Inuzuka woman could be, unless she felt compelled to be. Hiruzen, who was small enough and wise enough to hide beneath his desk while Rin vented her frustration, heard Nanami and Hiroshi trying to reason with Rin while he assumed Kurenai was still covering Naruto's ears from the toxic soup coming from Rin's mouth. Then, all of a sudden, everything was silent, and Hiruzen thought everything was fine. He peeked up from his desk, but nearly urinated when he saw Rin's face 6 inches from his, with a look that said, I'm gonna devour your soul. It took his decades of political experience to talk his way out of this one, but he Ipita the Hokage, the god of shinobi, the professor, the man who has witnessed horrific battles and innumerable things that could make your worst nightmares come true. Rin deadpanned. Why? Because it sounded like a good idea at the time. Marvel in his sly wit and political shrewdness. A B-rank mission is what I'm already doing. She deadpanned. How in the hell am I going to take a Jenin team on missions too? Take him with you. His ruthless negotiating techniques and his cool, collected manner. The way she was acting seemed to be getting worse. You want me to take a 3-month-old infant on missions? Maybe. Yes, he was most likely going to die, but fortunately, the doors opened for him. Hey, dads, what the devil? Kurenai, who was holding Naruto, chose to back up and tell him what was going on. Asuma turned to see Sume attempting to flatten herself against the wall, Hiroshi and Nanami appearing reluctant to approach Rin, who was hanging over his dad's desk staring at something behind it. Asuma's eyebrows raised as she told the bewildered Chunin, Chan just found out that she signed on to be our actual Junin instructor, and that she has to take us on missions and stuff. He said, that ain't so bad. Rin squirmed and turned to Asuma, saying, not so bad. Naruto is already in my care. She gave the Chunin a growl. Rin didn't seem convinced, so Asuma, who had spent too much time with her to be too bothered by her darker side, simply shrugged and said, so, take him with you. He answered in the same way as his father, but without the fear of dying. Missions that endanger not only the Genin's lives but also his, she retaliated. True, so you wouldn't be doing any B ranks because those would be too risky, Asuma said with a nod. However, C ranks wouldn't. Excellent experience for the Jenin, little to no chance of enemy shinobi, and typically escorting civilians who are, let's face it, about as defenseless as an infant anyhow. Heck, you could even make him a cute little baby harness with armor. Additionally, there are many C ranks available, you can choose the safest one. The issue is resolved, right? He summoned the Hokage, who was attempting to flee through the window at the moment. The Hokage appeared to be a deer in headlights, but he soon collected himself and said, yes. It is, of course. I had always intended to do that. For added security, Asuma can even accompany you on some, he said with a smile. Asuma grinned and said, see, there is nothing to be concerned about. As charmingly as possible without coming across as a clown, he said, so, go home, relax, and I'll come over with takeout and we can discuss how it's gonna all work later. Rin appeared to calm down and accept the situation, saying to the Jenin, alright guys, looks like I'm stuck with you gakis until you make Chunin. Yada, We are able to retain Ka-chan. They shouted in unison. Rin looked at them cockeyed. Keep. Who the devil am I? A pet? Oh, oi. Don't give me a hug. You have a sweaty, dirty smell. After the commotion died down, she grabbed Naruto and peeled her sister off the wall before leaving the office with the Jenin in tow, chatting among themselves. She grumbled as she attempted to pry off the game. Asuma raised an eyebrow and said, "Hey Pops, how much of that did you smoke before she?" Hiruzen sighed deeply in relief as the doors closed, then sat down in his chair and nipped up his pipe. Enough. I had an advantage because I had to deal with Fugaku. He interrupted Asuma as he lit the pipe, saying, "Kamai, I haven't seen a face that scary since I accidentally set your grandmother's garden on fire when I was 11. Asuma laughed. "Yeah, she's can be a handful when she needs to be," he said to his father. As he gazed off into the distance, he remarked, "I never expected her to react like that." Asuma's expression turned retroactive. She's been acting very protective of Naruto lately, particularly in light of the events surrounding that abduction attempt. Asuma wondered if her adopted family was the only source of her last name. Does she consider him to be her own puppy? The Hokage supplied, gaining a nod from Asuma. Possibly. The Hokage shuddered as he said, "You might have a hell of a time trying to take Naruto away from her once the mission has ended." The buzz wasn't even enough to prevent the feeling of dread when that day arrived. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," he said with a smirk. "Well, I have takeout I need to get, and possibly a lady in need of a good massage," Asuma said, almost tap dancing out of the Hokage office after giving a languid nod. Hiruzen laughed at the idea of Asuma pursuing Rin, but the laughter was hysterical. It seems that Sarutobi men had a curse of pursuing some of the scariest or strongest women in the village, though he wasn't sure which. Perhaps his future grandchildren will be a better predictor. He had a few hours before his next appointment, so he finished thinking, took out an orange book, and lit his pipe again. Bringing a baby on a shinobi mission may seem like a crazy idea to many people. And they would be correct given the structure and mentality of shinobi in the modern era. The ninja village and all of its principles, including will of fire, protect the future generations, teamwork is key, and the less known but no less evident, quantity over quality, are examples of this. Shinobi. Born children were exposed to conflict before they even left the mother's tit, who typically only had a 4-month leave during the last term of her pregnancy because they weren't capable of filling a role in the clan's shinobi ranks. However, if one were to share these ideas with a shinobi before the great villages, he would call you a weakling and probably piss on your shoes. Quality over quantity was the law during the feudal era, when the clan structure was the norm, and clans didn't survive by having a lot of weak children who wouldn't pull their weight in a battle. The idea was that exposing the children to shinobi life at such a young age would make them stronger should they survive to witness clan training. Many previous world leaders have undergone such baptism by fire, including Senju's Hashirama and Tobirama, and even the professor himself, Sarutobi Hiruzen. After the baby was strong enough, the mother and child would be sent on missions, though they would be safer than if the mother had been alone. After the villages were established and civilian shinobi began to flood the ranks, the practice ended, allowing the clans to settle and adopt a more peaceful perspective. However, one lucky or unlucky infant would witness such a baptism firsthand, albeit on a much less risky mission. After all, they were merely assisting a tailor and his family in their move from the capital to Konoha, so how dangerous could it be? His caretaker had other ideas. "Are you certain that this armor is the best available?" "This is triple-layered case-hardened steel," Rin said anxiously, examining the device they had constructed while Asuma continued to fasten it to her. Asuma growled to himself from below and behind Rin before responding. "This is triple-layered case-hardened steel," Rin said. "You are far less protected than an Iron Country samurai," he reprimanded her. "I am a Junin with a lot of experience, and Naruto is," she said, furrowing her brow at him. Asuma interrupted her tirade before it gained momentum once more, saying, "I'm going to be attached to the Junin with lots of experience, so relax. What the hell kind of person brings an infant with them on missions?" Rin complained to herself instead. She grumbled. Asuma snorted briefly before responding. He explained as he fastened down another strap, "From what I've heard, they used to do it before the villages popped up because they thought it made them better shinobi in the long run." Rin's eyebrows quirked. "Who the hell told you something like that?" Asuma appeared to enter a trance. Rewind. Asuma, then 7 years old, was listening carefully in his father's office when he said, They really did that back then, Pops?" Asuma questioned incredulously. Yes, they did. I experienced the same thing. I'm going to send you to an Anbu and put him on a suicide mission if you do this again, yelled a bald Hokage, smoke still evaporating from his freshly cleared skull. Flashback at the end. Rin turned her head back, looking completely perplexed as to who the hell he was referring to. Asuma laughed to himself. His hairline never really did recover, before returning to securing the carrier. As the final strap was adjusted, he exclaimed, "And, done." Rin moved slightly in it before turning to face the three Jenin seated on the couch. "Guys, what do you think?" When she saw the Jenin's reactions, she slowed down. Hiroshi and Kurenai were both blushing intensely, and Nanami was looking at Rin in her chest with what appeared to be jealousy. Rin turned to Asuma, who hadn't gotten up yet for some reason. "Well, it does tend to emphasize your breasts, Rin-chan," he explained to the bewildered Kunoichi. Rin opened the closet door and looked in the mirror, her eyes wide. Although she wasn't particularly large compared to a pervert or a sannin, she could definitely compete with a hyuga if she tried, as her breasts were somewhere in the high seas. Unfortunately or fortunately they worked in tandem with the amoured baby carrier, which essentially served as a bustless corset, pouring over it for everyone to see and others to scoff. Rin's reaction was evident for a girl of her caliber. "Oh, I resemble a red light district hooker of about 200 ryu." She yelled at her reflection, and Asuma at last leapt from his spot. "That is completely nonsensical. Bam, a hooker with those resources would have cost 5 times as much. You aren't assisting." As she nailed Asuma on top of his head, sending him back to the ground, she roared. "Rin, hurry up." He attempted to soothe the Kunoichi who was experiencing facial spasms while reassessing herself in the mirror. "It doesn't look that noticeable, and I'm sure that once Naruto is in it, his head will distract any other attention." When he realized it wasn't working so well, he quickly closed the closet door and went to get Naruto. He returned a moment later with the baby and persuaded Kurenai to assist him in strapping Naruto into the harness. When all was said and done, Asuma and Kurenai took a step back with the other 2 Jenin to observe the harness's front, which was made up of 3 steel plates with rubber layers between them, all woven into a cloth skin with padding on the inside. The front was connected to the harness's chest plate, which transferred any kinetic force to Rin before Naruto. The arm and leg protection was equally impressive, with heavy leather tubes covered in woven wire mesh. His hands and feet were not exposed, but that wasn't a big deal because he was a baby. Overall, it was baby protection to the highest degree for the favors Asuma called in for. His head was unprotected, of course, but he had plenty of side and back cushioning because his head was positioned directly between Rin's breasts. The Jenin had a different reaction to Naruto's good fortune than Asuma, who could only pout jealously. Rin jerked out of her unhappy state to glare at Hiroshi, who had just snorted, noticing that all 3 Jenin were trying to contain their laughter. "What?" Nanami interrupted her, saying, "It looks like something out of a science fiction movie." Kurenai gave Nanami a covered snort when he said, "Like Naruto is the pilot of some super Ka-chan robot." Hiroshi had other ideas. "Put the reactor in motion. Liberate Mars." Nanami took offense at his quiet groan as she and the other 2 started laughing. Rin pouted and said, "Haha." Their laughter turned to choking noises as she threatened, "Won't be funny when you're taking turns carrying my pack." Hiroshi and Nanami in particular were aware of how heavy a Junin's pack could be. Feeling that she had received her recompense, Rin went back to the closet and opened it once more to check herself in the mirror. Her triumphant grin dropped when she did so, and she mustered the last of her dignity before turning back to the Jenin. "Okay, everyone, prepare for a week-long mission. What is Kurenai-chan here?" she inquired, gesturing with her hand. "So we can go buy our supplies and packs now?" Rin perspired as she asked, forgetting the Jenin's necessary supplies in her haste to retrieve the harness. "Yes, I suppose. You were aware of which store to visit. And don't buy the most expensive stuff," she said, passing out what was left of the stipend for them. At times, she felt like the whole bunch's mother. "Be back in an hour. The reasonably priced items will be equally effective," she yelled after them. 2 hours later, after the Jenin returned and packed, they made their way to the gates, where they signed out at the gate station after an embarrassing equipment check and hurried to make time. Rin wasn't sure if it was the combination of sights, sounds, and feel, or simply the fact that his head was nestled between her breasts, but Naruto had been sleeping for the majority of the trip so far. In the meantime, Naruto was adjusting to the changes and bumps of shinobi travel rather well. Rin didn't have to ask why the Jenin were so happy and active, especially since this was their first trip outside the village in months, but Hiroshi's enthusiasm overwhelmed the others as he regaled them with his extensive knowledge. Therefore, a conflict with the Iwa Nin would be more beneficial on forested, alluvial hills. If it had been Kumo Nin. Now. Where the hell was he during the Third Shinobi War? Rin thought to herself. In retrospect, they could have used him instead of the idiots who lead their teams into bare open fields and terrain with exposed rock. After clearing her mind, she turned to face the sun and noticed that it was almost sunset. She gave the Jenin and Asuma a signal and they moved from the trees to the ground, saying, "All right, guys, we've made good time, so we're going to set up camp here. If you don't want to eat rations for dinner, Nanami, go find something we can cook. Go set up the tents, Kurenai. Go find us some firewood, Hiroshi, and use your knowledge of geography. I'm tired of smelling the load that Naruto dropped an hour ago, so I'm going to dispose of it." She said. "Asuma, hand me over my pack," and the three Genins gave a mock salute before zipped off as Asuma handed over her pack. Hiroshi was carrying it, but he had missed a tree branch earlier due to the added weight, and Rin didn't want to treat another concussion, so she gave it to Asuma for the duration of the journey. Rin shook her head, avoiding the situation, and returned to cleaning up the toxic mess that was on Naruto. Asuma simply made himself scarce while she worked on that. Asuma had the muscles to carry it in his pack. Damn, he had muscles. The first hour had been spent with Asuma chopping the deer into steaks and Rin making dinner. The second hour was a little busier. Nanami had somehow caught a deer, claiming it essentially just sat and stared at her. 2 hours later, they were all gathered around a campfire. Furashubaku. As Asuma spoke to Rin, she was tapping her foot and wondering where in the world Hiroshi was. "That thing was huge," Asuma said. As he cleaned his trench knife, Nanami grinned cockily and said, "Maybe we should take it to the taxidermy so we can mount the head on the wall. It'll last us the rest of the mission, and halfway into next year." PFF'd. During a light-hearted reprimand, Rin said, "There's no way in hell that I'm having a deer head staring at me from the living room every day." A rustling approached them, signaling the end of that. Hiroshi emerged from the foliage carrying a bundle of wood, a sign, and a bundle of wood. Rin looked at the sign before turning pale. "Hey, I had no idea that the Nara had clan grounds this far out. Perhaps if we're lucky, we'll get to see some of the deer," he said, trailing off as he gazed at the skeleton of what was clearly a buck, covered in blood and flesh. Asuma's face was filled with horror, and Nanami appeared to be about to cry. Kurenai emerged from a tent and huffed, "There, all the tents are up. Take them out," Rin ordered hysterically. "Nani?" Kurenai yelled in frustration. "We must leave this place immediately. Bury the remains, Asuma. Move and set up camp, everyone else," she yelled. "Where?" Kurenai yelled. "A mile on the other side of where that sign came from," Rin said, pointing to the spot where Hiroshi emerged from the foliage. She ordered. End of flashback. As Rin complained about inaccurate maps, it ultimately took them an additional hour to repitch camp a mile and a half from their starting point. Rin cooked up some of the meat they had sealed after they had moved their camp, and they were unsure if it was the deer's flavor or their perception that it had been poached, but it was incredibly tasty. They all went to bed after supper and never talked about the incident again. Naturally, these were expert demonstrations, and the Jenin was the only one to observe, but early the following morning Rin and Asuma gave the Jenin an impromptu lesson in campsite concealment and hiding one's trail. Once Rin and Asuma's paranoia was calmed, the group reoriented themselves and sped toward the capital. They arrived in just one more day, and the three Jenin were amazed by the size of the capitale. It was easily twice as big as Konoha, with more stores, restaurants, and everything but the Fire Daimyo's castle was the most striking feature, easily dwarfing all other buildings in the city. "Sugoi. The Hokage Tower appears to be our home." As Kurenai saw the structure, he remarked incredulously. "Trust me, when you reach Junin, you'll see which pales against which," Rin snorted, leading the group into the city, leaving the Jenin to speculate about her meaning. They found the shop after a few arguments between Rin and Asuma over directions, and naturally, Rin would say that they found it easily when she wrote the report later. Fortunately for the Jenin, the tailor had already stored the majority of the small, more tedious items, leaving only the bulkier items, which the team discovered would not need to be ready to move until tomorrow after they finished the paperwork for their lease, transfer, change of address, and all the other things that Ninja detested. "I apologize, Rin.san, but we weren't prepared for your quick arrival." As her violet eyes moved from Rin to Naruto, the tailor's young wife remarked, "You must have been running here incredibly quickly." "Something on your mind, Missa?" Rin said, speculating about her unspoken query. After giving Rin a sheepish glance, the woman said, "Gomen, it's Miami. I simply did not anticipate Konoha sending a new mother on a mission. Do you think it might be a bit risky for him?" Now that Rin was looking, the woman said, "You're young and extremely pregnant." It was a very smart and perceptive question, and the answer was as obvious as it was. In hindsight, however, it wasn't that simple. With half of the shinobi force gone, things were completely out of control. Jenin, fresh out of the academy, were bundled haphazardly into cells, given Chunin senseis, and sent straight into missions, and with D-rank missions non-existent and the more sensible team leaders demanding C ranks, it left little room for creativity as to what they were sent on. Additionally, the fact that this year's failing Jenin teams meant that dysfunctional teams were on active duty, and retired shinobi and even clan heads were being reactivated. Sume had been reinstated 3 days ago. Overall, given that at least half of the new teams led by Chunin would die before their 4th mission, an Anbu-level Junin with a baby strapped to her leading a Jenin team around was one of the much less dire circumstances at the moment. Rin swallowed her pride and said, "Well, you know, a single kunoichi mother just trying to keep the bills paid and not give up my son at the same time. Of course, sharing such information was suicide, especially if a foreign power found out." She lied through a sheepish smile, saying, "Plus, my team is going on missions like this, so might as well take him with me instead of trying to pay someone to watch him 1 or 2 weeks at a time." "Oh," the wife said, putting her hands to her mouth. "You're so poor, my love. I apologize for bringing up such a horrible subject. You must have been devastated to lose your husband shortly after giving birth." The wife said, "You show such dedication," and she scooped Rin up in an awkward hug with Naruto stuck in the middle. Naruto didn't seem to mind being sandwiched between 2 sets of enormous breasts, the new set being noticeably larger. However, Rin was agitated and said, Yeah. She said nervously, "Thank you, Miami-san." The woman had an extremely strong grip for a civilian, and Asuma gave her a knowing smirk before turning back to the 200-pound sewing machine. "Not at all, Rin-san. I hope better times are upon you soon," the woman said, releasing her grip and pushing a pink lock out of her face. "In any case, I ought to go check on my husband. There shouldn't be any issues if you want to begin packing up early," she said before heading to a back room. Now that the awkward situation was over, Rin gave the Jenin instructions to assist in packing the family's home so they could leave earlier the following day. Rin had allowed the Jenin to explore the city for a few hours, but it bothered her that they ran straight to what Rin believed she remembered as the more shady area of town. Asuma had persuaded her to eat, so they went to the area with the best dining options. A few hours later, almost everything was packed. Rin was fussing over Naruto, who was no longer in the armored carrier and was in a much more comfortable stroller, before she chose to make fun of Asuma. They found a nice little restaurant and sat down at an outside table. A waitress arrived moments later and set down menus. She smirked slyly and said, "You know, Asuma, a lot of people could misinterpret this as a date." "True, but I think people are more prone to misinterpret it as 2 new parents at a restaurant with their son," he shot back, grinning as well but not raising his gaze from his menu. "Perhaps as an adoption," Rin snorted as she glanced down at the baby. "He lacks the colors of our eyes and hair." She nodded confidently and said, "No, I'm leaning toward a date between a single mother and her new boyfriend." After giving it some thought, Asuma said, "All right, let's wager on it. The waitress will undoubtedly be the decisive element." He raised his glass of water and said, "Whoever loses pays the bill." The waitress returned as they started to drink from them, and Rin grinned and said, "Okay smartass, I'll take you up on that." She also raised her glass. "I apologize for the wait. Are you and your son prepared to place your order?" The waitress felt like she was going to have her ass chewed, and Naruto simply found the humorous scene amusing as the couple spent the next 2 minutes evacuating the water they inhaled through fits of coughing and chest pounding. After an hour and a half, along with a few others, the 3 Jenin engaged in animated conversation as they traveled to the hotel room Rin had assigned them, their hands filled with opaque plastic sacks, only to be ambushed as soon as they stepped inside. "Dude, tell me, do I appear elderly? I don't, tell me." They all froze well, except for Nanamiya as Rin shook a startled Nanami and yelled in desperation, wondering if they should make up a lie. At last, Kurenai spoke up without hesitation and acknowledged, "Well, there are dark circles under your eyes." After Rin froze and stopped shaking her, Nanami joined the honest train. Thyrsa. Also that streak of gray in your hair Chan, she said softly. After turning ash white, Rin stormed into the bathroom and threw Asuma out of the mirror's path. Asuma. Sensei, did you mascara your peach fuzz? Hiroshi asked Asuma in an odd way. He inquired uncertainly. Of course not, Asuma said, waving his hands in front of him. What a dumb idea, hee. How does it appear? With hope, he asked. It looks like a drawn on goatee and does nothing to hide the baby fat that's still on your face, said Nanami, who was the one who shot him down. Hiroshi gave Asuma a pat on the back as he slumped, saying, just keep smoking, sensei. He reassured the 2-year-old Chunin, I'm sure that'll suck the youth out of your face in no time. Rin dragged herself out of the bathroom, looking like a defeated woman, before Asuma could reply. Kurenai drew closer and closer until she said, Ka.ch, as she sat on the bed and gazed into space. Whoa, Rin started crying, shocking Kurenai into stopping her speech. Cries. When did I start to look so elderly? Sob. For Kami's sake, I'm only 18. Rin was crying, Naruto was crying, and Asuma was locked in the bathroom, probably trying to figure out a new way to look older. The Jenin felt overwhelmed. Sob. She managed to whine through her sobs, which apparently caused Naruto to start crying as well. The Jenin exchanged glances and nodded, and Kurenai went to soothe Naruto while Nanami soothed Rin and Hiroshi attempted to get Asuma out of the restroom. It took half an hour to soothe Rin, and Kurenai chose to order takeout rather than recommend a restaurant. As the group assisted in loading the family's wagon and returned to Konoha, the following day was a low-key affair. Rin watched over the clients in the wagon as they traveled through Fire Country, and although Miyami appeared to be a cheerful and, well, aloof woman, the luckiness seemed to be sucked out of her around her husband. The man was not a pleasant person to be around. In fact, he had earned the few underbreath mutterings of, grouchy son of a bitch, from pretty much everyone in the team, including his wife if her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. In addition to his attitude, he was pretty unattractive, with a balding cranium, a larger than usual forehead, and a possibly permanent scowl. Rin honestly didn't see what Miyami did in the man, that is, if it was a mutual relationship at all. Before a group of robbers decided to break in, the journey was uneventful and peaceful. 5 of them fell to the ground, including Akumo missing Nin, and Rin's group took defensive positions around the wagon. Rin assessed him, finding him to be Chunin in rank, with a scar across his dull face. All of your valuables, ladies and germs, please, now, he yelled as he produced a kunai and the others withdrew their weapons. You see the 5 of us leaf ninja, don't you? Rin exclaimed, perspiring. She deadpanned. With a smug expression, the leader said, as if wearing a brat makes you a much greater threat. Or what, will our mother make the other 4 children sick? He made fun of it. While the thieves were still laughing, Rin threw a single shuriken at them and began flipping through hand signs, causing Asuma and the Jenin to nervously back away from Rin as an evil aura surrounded her and the grass around her began to wither and die. She slammed Tiger together, saying, Shuriken Kage Bushin no Jutsu. She snarled. 1 shuriken turned into 200. Oh no, he heard them yelp and cry out as some of the shuriken found purchase in flesh that was in the way as they dove for cover. Fortunately, Rin had not spammed them vertically as much as she did horizontally in her rage, so there were only minor cuts. Regretfully, his partners were less skilled. How on earth did you find out about that? Rin turned back to face Asuma, who had been pleading with his old man to teach him that since he was a child. Oh well, launch an assault, Asuma complained before turning to face the Jenin. Pick your opposite and disable him, he explained to the Jenin. She barked before pursuing the Kumo Nin who was attempting to flee the scene. Nanami was sinking into the ground, Hiroshi had his batons ready, and Kurenai made a few hand gestures before charging at her opponent, who was thrashing wildly. The man whimpered as he lay face down with his prickly ass hanging in the air, and Asuma pointed at him and said, stay, before lighting a cigarette. Asuma approached his opponent, who appeared to be in a world of pain and apparently failed to move his ass out of the way of Rin's jutsu literally. Now where the hell is Rin? Asuma thought as the Jenin quickly dragged their opponents back, slightly charred, electrocuted, and beaten. Rin jumped out of the bushes a few moments later with a demonic look and her hands going through signs, and the Nuke.Nin scrambled out of the bushes a few moments later, screaming bloody murder as he ran down the road, so his thoughts must have been heard. Before Chan leaned forward and screamed, Kaden, Karyu Enden. Naruto felt a pleasant, warm sensation emanating from her chest as he watched the flurry of hand movements in front of him. And he saw a lovely stream of fire dragons spiraling in front of him. When the flames finally subsided, all that was left was a charred faceplate of a Kumo headband with a slash through it. The entire technique was directed at the missing Nin, who, despite his best efforts to flee, was precisely targeted. Rin picked up the pile of ash, wiped it off on her shorts, and put it in her pocket before moving to where the rest of the team had the bandits detained. The bandits were just urinating, and the team was spasming and giving Rin disbelieving looks. Rin examined them and found that they were wimps, obviously just toadies, and that they would only receive 6 months in prison at most because they were only an accessory to an attempted robbery. To be honest, it wasn't worth the time to drag them into a local police station. It would be too much trouble to drag you into jail, she said with a sly smile. Naturally, this had the desired effect of making them cowering idiots. That is, unless you tell me something, she added, capturing their full attention. It would be so much easier to just kill you and be on our way, she said thoughtfully. Who among these ninjas is the oldest? She said with a very obviously fake smile. One of the dumber thieves was about ready to answer that she was, but the smartest lightly said. Thief slapped a hand over his mouth before he could answer. He is, he declared, gesturing to Asuma, who appeared content. The thieves left, their tails tucked between their legs, after Rin clicked her tongue and waved her hand at them, saying, "Okay, get the hell out of here, and if I see you robbing anyone again, what I did to your boss will seem merciful compared to what I will do to you." HMPF. Do you ninjas work that way? You're too lazy, so let the scum go. Rin heard from the cart. That's classified, he said nonchalantly, making the asshole grit his teeth. Ashuma saw her muscles clenching up and responded on her behalf, squashing any positive vibes she had gained from frightening them. They went out after making sure everything was in order, but Rin was feeling even worse than before. After 4 hours, they pulled into a town as the sun was starting to set, and Rin sighed more passionately than she had since the fight ended. All right, let's find a cheap hotel for the night and. Asuma interrupted her with a smile, saying, actually, I know an inn with a spa in this town, let's go there instead. Rin gave him a disbelieving glance and said, are you crazy? In front of her, Asuma flashed a big wad of Ryu and said, we don't have the money for something like that. As he headed toward the aforementioned inn, he said definitively, don't worry, I'll get the rooms for us, you get the clients settled in. Rin simply sighed in defeat, figuring that since he was paying, why not? She looked down at Naruto, who was dozing in the harness. He hadn't taken a bath since the start of this mission, and now that her nose was close enough to herself, neither had she. She followed Asuma with the rest of the group, keeping that objective in mind. After an hour, in the bathtub, Rin was holding Naruto on her lap while she lathered his bush of bright yellow hair. It's so soft, she thought jealously, whereas her own hair appeared to have been in a blender after being exposed to a heat lamp for a day or two. Honestly, gray hair at 18, this assignment will put me in an early grave, she thought morbidly as she pulled on her hair. A knock on her room's door interrupted her as she was washing Naruto's hair, so she got out of the tub with him and wrapped herself in a towel before crossing the room nude, placing him on the bed and wrapping the towel around herself. She answered the door in a respectable manner. When she noticed Rin's lack of clothing, a staff member on the opposite side greeted her with a professional smile and said, good evening, Inuzuka-san. I see you're ready for your supreme treatment package. But I didn't order any treatment package, Rin said, looking shocked, and the staff member simply waved it away, saying, your boyfriend already paid for it. Please follow me, she demanded, holding Rin's hand. But, my baby, Kurenai lifted the still naked baby off the bed and said, I'll take care of him. Rin thought, how did she get in my room so fast? As the staff member dragged her out of the room, Kurenai looked at the baby after Rin left and said, you're going to be fine until Ka-chan's back, aren't you? She asked the staring baby, who merely spit up the baby onto his own face as a response. Kurenai sighed and said, of course not, you're Naruto after all. Since she needed a bath anyhow, she decided to clean him up once more before heading to the restroom. After 3 blissful hours, Rin walked well, floated back up the hall. The 3 hours had worked their magic. She looked younger than when she had accepted Naruto's assignment, with all the kinks in her muscles gone, the calluses she had accumulated over the years gone, and most importantly, the gray hair gone. When she noticed Asuma carrying an ice bucket out of his shared room, she pushed her thoughts aside and hurried up to approach him. When he sensed the presence, he turned around and said, "Hey Rin-chan." "Whoa, how was?" he yelled as she dragged him into the room he had just left, and she swiftly pushed Nanami and Hiroshi out of it, leaving Asuma and herself alone. "Apparently my boyfriend paid for a rather expensive beauty package for me," she said to the now smirking Asuma as she sat on the bed and gazed at him. "Wow, that must be some boyfriend you have," he said with a laugh. When she crossed her legs, Asuma's face instantly changed as he turned around, and Rin's smirk demonstrated her skill. "So why would you want a girl like me?" she inquired at last. "A better question would be why wouldn't I?" Asuma asked, turning around and looking directly into her eyes with a compassionate expression. "You are intelligent, strong, funny, but serious when necessary, good with children, an excellent teacher, not arrogant, possess a goddess body, and have demon-level cooking skills." Rin appeared to have spent too much time in the sauna by the end, and she was intrigued by the floor. I'm also 4 years older than you, in Anbu, and technically an Inuzuka, Mr. Sarutobi, she shot back, referring to the long-standing rivalry between the Sarutobi and the Inuzuka that is less intense than that between the Uchiha and the Senju or Hyuga and more along the lines of dogs and monkeys. "You're obviously not a lifer like some of the other women in Anbu, and you're hardly an Inuzuka, and I'm not the Sarutobi my dad wanted me to be," Asuma said, raising an eyebrow. "By our 20s, you'd never notice the difference." He was sitting on the edge of the bed and jokingly said, not even flexible enough to earn Enma's approval. "You're an 18-year-old Anbu who could die the day after you return to the core, and you're still technically a virgin. And there's a cute younger guy who paid for 3 hours of heaven, and he gave you a lot of compliments, and, most importantly, he's the first guy to show emotional and sexual interest in you since Obito. Throw caution to the wind and go for it," Rin thought after feeling conflicted about dating him. Asuma watched her face change into various expressions, which would be funny if it weren't for what she was thinking about. At last, she gave him a sly smile and asked, "Is this about sex?" she said, nearly knocking him off the bed. "No, it's whatever you want from it," he said huffily after regaining his composure. "So, is sex at issue here?" He heard it again, but this time he was completely perplexed. "Wha? FWUMP. Something white was thrown at him, and when he pulled it off, he discovered it was one of the spa's robes. His eyes widened, and he glanced at Rin before turning to quickly avoid the naked Junin on the bed. Wow, he bluffed, his face turning completely red, and blood dripping from his nose. "Damn, she did a great job hiding that body. Come on Asuma-kun, you're not going to ignore these, are you?" Rin said as she crawled across the bed in his direction. If a cat could smirk, it would look like Rin right now. As she put her arms around him and pressed herself against him, she emphasized. "They're pressing against my back, so I don't see how I can, hee." "Whoa," he yelled as Rin swiftly straddled him and pulled him backwards. "Don't you want this to be romantic?" From beneath her, he reasoned. Asuma caught her pouting. "Let's just do it, the first time is never romantic." "You're a virgin, right?" he asked startledly, then smirked and abruptly changed the subject, making Rin eek. "Even though they weren't made that way," he said, "then I get to be the teacher then," as he quickly undressed. "MMPF, you're not a virgin." Any further discussion was interrupted as he met her lips. The following morning, as they gazed at their senseis, the Jenin was astounded by what they saw. Asuma had a constant smile on his face and a skip in his step await, that was a limp, while Rin was so radiant that she made Naruto appear to be an eclipse. She practically skipped everywhere she went as she gathered everyone up after breakfast so they could leave. Nanami whispered to her 2 teammates, "Ka-chan must have thanked him for the surprise. So that's why she threw us out of the room," Hiroshi retorted. "Asuma should do it more often if all it took was some hair dye, the works, and a midnight romp," Kurenai shrugged. "When the hell did I get so dirty-minded?" She frowned as she introspected. "Kurenai-chan, you've always been a dirty-minded person," Nanami snorted. She poked Kurenai's nose and joked, "Now that you're living with a bunch of perverts, it just pronounced itself more. As if I needed you to tell me that." Kurenai pushed her away with her hands. "Dude, hurry up, the sooner we return, the sooner I begin preparing dinner once more." Rin encouraged, her step bouncing. Standing at the wagon stable's entrance, Miyami gazed at Rin's energy with glassy eyes and said, "Wow, that's so lovely. It calls to me." Food was at stake, damn it. She cried out as the three Jenin picked up the pregnant woman and carried her up to the wagon and placed her inside. The Jenins arrived at the gates of Konoha in less than a day thanks to Rin's revitalized energy and their ravenous appetite. In front of the guard station, where the two academy students were standing watch, Rin stopped the procession. Greetings from Konohagakure, the elemental country's most fierce ninja village. With his hands extended wide, one of them exclaimed. Katetsu. That's not what the instructor intended to convey. Be more professional, said the other, giving the now familiar Katetsu a head slap. Come on, Azumo, that is incredibly dull. Katetsu jeered. Halt, state your name and business within the village. Before Rin finally made the decision to end the argument, she said to the two, enough. Honestly, what the hell are two academy students doing on guard duty? Oh, Azumo said, our teachers say it's to gain valuable insight and experience in our future chosen careers. Kotetsu also replied, to be honest, I think it's just because the job is so boring, that not even a Jenin wanted to do it. Kotetsu's eyes widened as Azumo continued, or the fact that there are Anbu watching the gates at all times, so our job is just to handle the paperwork. You mean they were observing me when I urinated behind the guard shack? He leapt to his feet and yelled, you're all perverts. At the edge of the town. He cried, and a half-second later, big drops of sweat identified each Anbu in the vicinity. This from the guy who urinated behind our shack in broad daylight. Azumo jumped out of his seat. He countered. I was reluctant to abandon our post. You were rude to our post. Stop talking to each other. Rin yelled. They came to a swift halt and slammed back into their chairs. The team of Inuzuka Rin is returning from mission Che.17334 inches, she said firmly. As the corporal signed, Azumo glanced quickly at the logbook and said, C. Rank, Hino Kuni, Escort, number 17334, here it is. Mr. Arasaka, Snort Dororo, and Mrs. Arasaka Miyami, I need you to sign your names here for temporary resident status. You will then have 2 weeks to register with Konoha's Immigration and Census Bureau before you risk deportation. However, only Miyami appeared to be paying attention. Azumo studied the mission file's notes. He told the bored woman, it also says that the Hokage wants to hear your report personally, Rin-sama. She nodded and gestured her posse through, but she was seized in an embrace before she could get away. Miyami squeezed Rin's life out and said, thank you very much for your help, Rin-chan. I hope to see you again in the future. She said, yeah, you too, Miyami. Good luck getting set up, before slipping out of Miyami's hold and waving as she hurried away. In the Tower of Hokage. After the debriefing, the Hokage said, well, that was boring, which made everyone fall to the ground. The first person up was Rin. She said angrily, that's a good thing, isn't it? She was waved away by the Hokage. He replied bluntly, puffing on his pipe with a disillusioned expression, for you, not for the guy who spends most of his time behind a desk. Rin appeared prepared to attempt to silence the man, but he interrupted her before she could lose it. Pointing to a photo that bore a striking resemblance to him, he stated, in any case, based on the description you provided me of the missing nin, I have concluded that it's most likely this man. His name was Raiga Chunin, kicked out of his village a year ago. Until the final line, wait, thrown out. Rin was nodding eagerly. Yes, apparently the fool mistaken the lightning daimyo's wife for a man. They literally threw him out of the village shortly after, seeing as how he had no valuable skills and a horrible mission record. No Rin, no bounty on him, he replied to the unasked question. Rin drooped her shoulders. She complained, making everyone perspire. So all I have to show is a charred Kumo plate. It wasn't even worth incinerating the guy, she said. He massaged her shoulders and said, don't look at it like that, Rin-chan, you accomplished your first mission with your team. Why don't we go home and settle back in? Yeah, you have. Checks are in the mission office, and you have a few days off until your next mission. I expect a written report in 2 days tops, just don't put it on my desk, Hiruzen said, raising an eyebrow but remaining on topic while glancing at the swaying towers of paper. Dismissed, was the final command he gave, and the group gave him a mock salute before leaving. Following their first successful mission, Rin decided to prepare a special meal after they had returned home. Hiroshi staggered into the kitchen as they smelled the delicious aroma of Rin's cooking. Kurenai questioned, hey Ka-chan. That smells delicious. What is it? As Hiroshi's stomach rumbled. Venison curry, Rin said, grinning at them.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.